Hey everyone, welcome back to Naruto Audio Fanfics 2.0. Today's fanfic is, what if Naruto brought Tayuya back to the leaf, and changed her heart forever? Part 2. A story full of action, emotions, secrets, and unexpected twists that will change Naruto's destiny forever. If you enjoy Naruto fanfics, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin the story. So, how do you want to start this? The forest around them gave ample room to hide, as well as mimicking their home territory. Jiraiya made a few hand seals, and Naruto felt the familiar buzz of chakra return to his system. The limiter on his chakra had been released. Momentarily, both levels of the slog seal currently on him had been let go as well. He was at full strength and speed. Go nuts, kid. The older man grinned. Suddenly, he was surrounded by clones advancing toward him. Before Jiraiya could react, some of the basic clones phased through him and a couple of the Kage Bunshin managed to knock him up into the air. Naruto's control had gotten good enough that he could mass-produce generic, illusory clones just as well as shadow clones. Futon. Tikiatsu. Naruto called out, his clones vanishing without dispelling. In the few seconds that it took Jiraiya to cast the defensive Doden Doaki no Jutsu in order to protect himself, the blonde original was gone as well. Once the cyclone finished grinding into the wall, and Jiraiya saw the lack of neon yellow hair around him, he grinned. The hunt was on, and Naruto's stealth was well renowned in Konoha. The boy could evade Anbu search teams with ease. He had a preternatural gift for finding shortcuts and pulling pranks. That last one hit home without warning when he felt a draft between his legs, an orange jacket darting off to either side of him and his pants around his feet. Imitating a technique he'd seen used by Sunagaku's puppet masters, Jiraiya extended chakra strings from his fingers and pulled the clothes back up. When the paint bomb dropped from above his head, Jiraiya batted it into the trees, splattering bark with fluorescent pink dye. You can't treat it like a game, Naruto. He said, feeling eyes on him from every direction. I'll do whatever I want. Naruto said, walking out. You're just a clone. Where's the real one? No, I am the real one. Maybe. At least, I'm real right now, aren't I? Besides, I'm trying to show off all my escape plans. Pranking you is just a fun bonus. Jutsu are cool, but it's how you use them that makes them cooler. Even having said that, Naruto turned himself around and shook his rear, mocking the Sannin for his inability to land a hit. When Jiraiya swung, however, Naruto's own Doaki technique rose up. While the blonde boy had no affinity for Doden techniques, Jiraiya had still thought it would be important to make sure he knew them, in order to counter enemy Futon Jutsu in the future. Now, with his right arm stuck in the wall and unable to be yanked out, he wondered if that decision had been a little premature. Using Kage Bunshin to train in jutsu almost felt like cheating, but he'd made a promise to himself that he would make Naruto the best ninja that boy could be. As a clone came in on his left side, aiming to hit him in the legs, he hopped up, only to get plowed in the chest by another one from the opposite side. Raiden. Raigania. Naruto said, the Raiden chakra causing his own Doden technique to crumble while it shocked Jiraiya's arm into numbness. Once again, when the dust settled, there was a distinct lack of blonde teenage boys surrounding him. This wasn't Naruto the ninja. It wasn't the Naruto who'd been seen in the Chunin exams, the invasion of Konoha, or even the mission to retrieve Sasuke. This was the Naruto who had grown up on the streets of the slums, kicking empty soda cans around to play soccer and always looking for the better exit when he stole something that he wanted. This was the Naruto who'd painted the Hokage monument in broad daylight, and gotten away before being caught. This was Naruto, in his element, at his best. Finally time for me to get started, I think. You've had your fun, kid, but this is where my show starts. Kaden. Enkai no Taiho. Jiraiya hopped up, fire dropping from his open mouth to touch the ground, and that was when the real Naruto knew it was time to get serious. Waiting in the tree line, he felt a surge of chakra come back as the ground was crushed by the force of the party cannon technique, his clones dispelling as the wave of flames reached them. He came out of hiding, landing on the ground without a sound behind Jiraiya, and sent chakra chains through the ground in front of the man. As Jiraiya jumped backward to avoid the blow, Naruto swung with the back of the falx to knock his teacher out. One Kawarimi later, the Sanin's body replaced with a log, Naruto spun backward and blocked a shot from Jiraiya's kunai. I appreciate the thought, but you don't need to hold back with me. If you actually manage to kill me, then I've taught you enough. The blade spun around in Naruto's hand as he reversed his grip on the handle, ready to wield it as it was intended. His index finger rested just below the top of the handle, where the leather no longer covered it. Though the sword didn't technically have a guard, the metal was shaped to curve in such a way that the blade's edge stuck out an inch past where his fingers rested, which gave the illusion of one. Naruto swung, and the kunai Jiraiya blocked with got a deep gouge in it for his trouble, almost all the way through. Had the tip hit, and not the length of the blade, then the smaller knife would likely have been struck from Jiraiya's hand, or shattered completely. Mentally noting that he needed to thank Higurashi, Naruto grinned before jumping back. Two of his shadow clones came out as they were cast, one vanishing with a shunshin as the real Naruto charged forward. The pair of shuriken Jiraiya threw at him didn't even faze the blonde, letting them tag him in the gut as he prepared to crash into Jiraiya with a killing blow. When he did, however, the man burst into smoke. It has been a shadow clone. When you use the Kawarimi, Naruto realized, rapidly healing skin causing the shuriken to fall out of his intestines. That's when you made the clone and hid. God, what a bait and switch. You complain about me using clones, and then you start. Hypocrite. You and I are one and the same. What do you think you're doing right now, complaining about the only clone I've made so far? You and I are nothing alike. There was steel in Naruto's voice, and Jiraiya could tell that he'd touched a nerve. Now fight me for real, this time. No more clones from either of us. No weapons. I'm gonna take you down with nothing but ninjutsu. Big talk. You've got a lot of chakra, but not many jutsu, oh well. Go ahead and try. Kaden. Gukyaku no Jutsu. The ball was 3 times as tall as Jiraiya, and the flames had barely left Naruto's lips as his hands went through memorized seals. Futon. Fujin Ken. The large, focused column of wind struck his grand fireball, almost mimicking a second Uchiha technique, the Hausenka no Jutsu. Unlike the Phoenix Fire, however, his technique was a bit more powerful, and terrain-consuming. Doden. Yomi Numa. Jiraiya called out one of his signature Doden techniques. The underworld swamp ran deep, and as Naruto cast his second Ragania, the lightning field technique, Jiraiya prepared his next attack. Sweden. Mizu Dangan. The aptly named water bullet shot from Jiraiya's palm, splashing the ground in front of Naruto and wetting him enough that his own Raiden technique rebounded to strike him. Had enough yet? Not even close. You know, watching Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke perform it so many times, I couldn't help but watch their hands. Monkey. Dragon. Rat. Bird. Ox. Snake. Dog. Tiger. Monkey. The sound emanating from Naruto's hand was not the chirping of 1,000 songbirds, it was the cawing laughter of 1,000 crows. Raiden. Chidori. Even though his arm was nearly 2 feet above the ground, a line dug itself into the ground wherever it moved. Took him long enough. Naruto's last shadow clone saluted, vanishing in a puff of smoke. Gonna need your help here, Kyuubi. He communicated, feeling its corrosive chakra take hold of his left arm while lightning encased his right. I remember when that technique was invented, Naruto. I know its weakness. Jiraiya said, the smile gone from his face as he looked around himself. Naruto's big talk and combination technique, even the countering of his Yomi Numa, had all been a decoy that he'd failed to notice. That clone had wrapped Garad ninja wire, likely a spoil of cleaning through Uzushio's rubble, around a very tight ring of trees. He hadn't even seen the clone, another testament to Naruto's stealth prowess. Maybe, Naruto said, left eye becoming red as he gave into his rage. But you haven't seen what I've been practicing on my own, with this or anything else I've done. Naruto drew out 8 kunai, 2 between each finger on his left hand. Every one had the kanji for teleport brush painted onto its surface. Bastardized as it might have been, Jiraiya remembered what that technique was capable of. Namikaze Minato had torn through a whole battlefield, practically by himself, with the Hiraishin. On 8 separate tree trunks around them, a kunai was buried nearly to the ring after being thrown. You shouldn't keep secrets from me. The other eye was claimed, demonic red shining in place of Naruto's normal blue. Or else I'll get really mad. This is the true flying thunder god. No longer intent on wasting time, Naruto ran forward, but he was too fast to redirect himself as Jiraiya moved out of the way of his strike. The man's counterattack proved useless, however, as Naruto willingly lost control of his left arm to the Kyuubi. It broke backwards at the elbow, accompanied by a sickening crack that made Rei and Kuga queasy from their vantage point. Catching the hand chop meant to knock him out, the blonde was gone without any warning. The sound of Naruto's Chidori was a giveaway, however, and Jiraiya turned around to see Naruto moving into attack from behind him, with his left arm healed and in its normal place. Once again, the technique's tunnel vision gave Jiraiya time to escape, and Naruto's inability to redirect in midair made him crash into the ground. Springing up by his hands before he lost all of his momentum, he vanished again, this time coming at his mentor from the side. Missing for the third time, Naruto's frustration got the best of him. In truth, all of those kunai were clones with strong henge placed over them, and every time he vanished was nothing more than a kawarimi with that disguised clone. Of course, he had been trying to replicate his father's signature jutsu, but all his efforts had proven fruitless thus far. They might never turn out to work, and that was an eventuality he was prepared for. Still, the look on Jiraiya's face had been nothing short of priceless. He paid no mind to his right arm, though blood was starting to leak profusely as the lightning and Biju chakra combined to peel and char his skin. One last charge had Jiraiya backed against two walls, leaving him with only the option to jump in order to evade the attack, which gave him the perfect vantage point to watch as Naruto did possibly the stupidest thing he'd ever seen. He shoved the Chidori through his own arm, the Kyuubi's chakra keeping it tethered like a flail to its handle, and directed it to grab a hold of Jiraiya's shirt before slamming him into the razor wire behind him. Tell me why, Naruto ordered. Tell me why. Why did they do it? Why did you try to keep it a secret from me? What the kind of good could come out of that? Eh? Ha 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 ha. Jiraiya was laughing from a mix of irony and remembrance, feeling the wires cut into his back and legs. He really hated that I never told him who his parents were. The white-haired Sannin passed out, and Naruto's severed arm threw him into the ground as hard as he could. Even though he wanted to cut loose, he reined the Kyuubi's chakra back in as his arm reattached itself and he stopped channeling chakra into his Chidori. Getting in a chakra-level pissing contest with a Jinchuriki, God, Tsunade Obaa-chan was right, you really are stupid. His kunai henged clones all returned to normal, and one tree walked until it was over the garrote fence before beginning to unwind it. Though he couldn't sense where they were, he called out to his watchers anyway. You don't have to pretend like you aren't there, he's going to need someone to take care of those cuts. What were you thinking? Tayuya wasn't angry, she was concerned. Even her tone was questioning, not the commanding anger that he was used to after something like this. I was pissed. Nothing I was doing was working, and even though he doesn't know I already know, he's still keeping my dad a secret from me. Naruto, the idea wasn't to go full tilt. He's one of Konoha's most powerful ninja, Tayuya took a moment to breathe, slowing herself. It was just to see how far you'd come and figure out how much else he needed to teach you, I think. Then he shouldn't have worded it the way he did, like his victory was a sure thing. Naruto replied, still a little angry. He gave me no restrictions, like it wouldn't matter that I'm technically the most dangerous person in Konoha since I can voluntarily lose control to the Kyuubi if I want to. I won't, but I could. Naruto. She understood. Fighting against an opponent could be infuriating, particularly when they were strong enough to back it up. I know, it's stupid. I'm stupid. It's one of my less endearing traits. He laughed derisively at that. You know, I think I liked it better before I was in the academy and became a ninja, when everybody was out for my blood. At least they were honest. He laughed again. Naruto, stop it. Oh, God, here we go. What's next? He doubled over, her fist deep in his gut. Punch. Naruto sat back up, head against the wall as he looked at the sky. You really need to watch what you say, piss brain. Tayuya continued. You got to work out how you felt with Birdshit Sensei, does that mean I get to pummel you into next week? He's the only one who has conflicted feelings about you. Naruto still wouldn't meet her gaze, even as she kept talking. The twins think of you like an older brother and a leader. Oboro-san is your grandmother. And I. She trailed off. He watched a particularly interesting cloud pass by. Maybe Shikamaru had been right, this was pretty therapeutic. I keep trying to tell you, or show you, that I care. And you never do anything about it. At that, he closed his eyes and smiled. Yeah, I know. It's bad of me, and it's not like I can't help it, but, how do I explain it? It's not that I don't have any attachment to you. We've known each other, lived with each other, for more than 7 months, now, right? He waited for her agreement to continue. Yeah, so that's not the issue. The problem is, I have a real shitty history with getting attached to people. I gave up the chance of having a home so that Ten-chan could have one. I chased after Sakura for years, against better judgment, even though there was no way in hell she'd ever look at me when Sasuke was an option. I can't tell you how many times she beat me into the ground just for talking to her, at least, until I got stronger than her. Sasuke, honestly, is probably my best friend. You've seen the holes he put in my chest. So you're scared of what'll happen to you if you try to get close to anyone else. When he opened his eyes again, he looked at her. I'm not gonna stop us doing what we've been doing, though. I've gotten too used to being around you. Besides, I'm not telling you no. All I'm saying is that I need to deal with my own issues first, before I can really think about letting someone else in. Yeah, I gotcha. She sat down next to him. You're not upset. I might be, just a little bit, but I think you're right. I haven't really tried to deal with everything that's up in my head from when I was still in Oto. You were, not a distraction, I guess, but it's like you were trying to avoid doing something you really didn't want to do. I get that, it's fine. He remembered Zabuza's words. In this world, people are either tools or wielders. That boy is my weapon, and I will use him until he breaks. If he was a tool that Tayuya needed to use in order to heal herself, then by the Kiri Nukenen's definition he would either be used, or he would use her in turn. He wasn't sure if he was comfortable with that line of thinking. The clouds passed by overhead, leaving the sun to shine on in their wake. Sorry. Jiraiya gave the word as a peace offering. He stood a few feet away from Naruto, who was repeatedly hitting a wooden pole in front of him. I'm not. Naruto's glare was cold, the scarring around his left arm a reminder of how far he was willing to go in order to win. You deserved that. Yeah, I didn't expect you to try that hard. Jiraiya frowned, knowing that his own attitude was likely to blame for the viciousness Naruto had displayed in the latter portion of their fight. He had a 5-pointed, if misshapen, star that was carved into his chest from where the blonde's severed arm had grabbed a hold of him, the burned scar a physical reminder to never underestimate the most unpredictable ninja that Konoha had ever produced. Naruto could see the other man in his peripheral vision, arms folded and a neutral expression on his face. That was the look he had when he was trying to hide something. Say what's on your mind, Ero Sennin. How did you know about it? Oh, God, let me get a list. Of course, he couldn't say that someone had told him. Kakashi had been very upfront about the fact that passing the knowledge on to Naruto would be grounds for the Sharingan wielder's execution. How about the fact that I look just like him? Maybe the fact that the Shadaime's wife was an Uzumaki and one of the Kyuubi's previous Jinchuriki, and I'm a Jinchuriki, so it stood to reason that the Yondaime Hokage's Uzushio-born wife might have been the missing Jinchuriki between us. You taught him, he taught Kakashi, and Kakashi taught me. His face was on the side of a goddamn mountain, and nobody connected the dots whenever they saw me. Oh, and you expect me to believe some bullshit mandate that the Sandaime made because he was afraid of enemy taking action against us for things that happened during a war. People die during war. People kill other people during war. That's what war is. When the war is over, you say, well, it sucks that all these people are dead, but there's not really much else we can do about it, and you move on. Individual grudges only mean something if you're willing to circumvent your cage and become a Nukenin over it, which most people aren't. Something told Jiraiya that the line of thinking in Naruto's brain hadn't gone on in his sensei's, though the short-lived war with Kumo after the Kyuubi attack which resulted in the Sandaime Raikage's death was evidence enough that Naruto's thought process wasn't always true. And also, one last thing. Naruto continued. I know that all married couples have their names put next to one another on the memorial stone, and I doubt that Uzumaki Kushina was married to Sarutobi Bawako. Jiraiya chuckled a little at that, and felt the tension between the two of them lighten up a little bit. Yeah, I actually taught your mother, too. And Shizune. Really? Yeah, Shizune used to be a really big crybaby, always worried about what her Uncle Dan would think looking down on her from heaven. She's just as talented as your parents were, but she hated killing. I didn't want her kindness to get destroyed by the war, so I signed the release form saying that my team would be dissolved and that Shizune would begin her medical training. How'd she end up with Tsunade? On the night of the Kyuubi attack, we were all holding a line of defense, and we watched your parents give their lives to defeat it. There were a lot of regrets that night, but Shizune was probably the worst of us. Her two best friends had just died. All three of them were clanless kids who grew up in the same orphanage, and went through the academy together, and got put on a team together. She couldn't believe they were dead, and she went into a 3-day coma from chakra exhaustion trying to heal them. After that, she decided that she couldn't stay, so my sensei decided to let her make her way to Tsunade, thinking that they might be able to do some good for each other. Hiruzen Jiji was a good man. Better than most people I've known. Jiraiya agreed. Say, what do you know about Kurigakure? I met a couple Nukenin from there, once. Momochi Zabuza and his assistant, a boy named Haku. Then you know about the bloodline purges? Naruto nodded. Well, Kiri is actually in the middle of a civil war right now. The Mizukage is winning pretty handily, since most of the village is too afraid of him to stand up to him, but there's a resistance fighting back. One of my informants is part of that resistance. If you're interested, we can leave Uzushio at any time and go to fight with them. Have you talked to the others? Only Oboro. She's not excited at the prospect of sending you off to war, but she thought it would do you a lot more good than staying in an empty village. Well, if I'm going anywhere, then you know Tayuya-chan will be too. And it'll be a hard sell to just leave the twins behind, even if Oboro Obaa-chan stays with them. That's true, but, even though they were born during the warring clans period, it would make me uncomfortable to make kids that young fight. They had turned 9, according to them, about a month and a half ago. Though they accepted the lessons they were given, as battlefield combat was all Jiraiya and Oboro had taught them so far, they were frustrated with the fact that they weren't getting the same treatment as Naruto and Tayuya. When Hashirama Itoko and Madara Itoko were 9, they had already been fighting in the wars for 2 years. Two-san never led us, though. We wanted to impress him enough that he led us on the battlefield. They were insistent that yes, they were much stronger than they looked, and they could probably manage to beat anybody they came across if they felt like it. Unfortunately, no, they couldn't exactly prove how much stronger they were than they looked, nor could they provide the names of anyone who they'd beaten. That meant, much to their displeasure, that they were relegated to practical learning, not battlefield application. Alright, I'll tell them. Naruto said. One last question. I've never heard of the Namikaze. How'd he come up with that? Oh, that. His chakra natures were Futon and Suiten. Even though his technique was called the Hiraishin, it was actually a combination of Futon chakra and high-level Fuinjutsu, along with the Senjutsu techniques I'll teach you before we're back in Konoha. Also, his nickname as the Kiro Senko was from his hair, and people associate yellow with Raiden, so the name stuck. Well, that was one mystery solved. So, wait, you, and me, and Birdshit Sensei. The three of us, we're going to go into live territory and we're going to help the losing side. I'm getting this correctly. If we up, you know how bad Konoha's head is gonna be on the chopping block with Kiri. Naruto didn't know exactly when Tayuya had started treating herself like she was a Konoha kunoichi, but he liked it. Yeah, but it's no fun to pick the winning team. Root for the underdog, all that jazz. Besides, if we do it right and the rebels win, do you know how good we'll get in with their new regime? That kind of stuff just isn't forgotten. Right, like Uzushio's partnership and close ties with Konoha. She rolled her eyes to one side, in an oh right, that, sort of gesture. Besides, Kiri is a major nation. I've been ready and waiting for months now, piss brain, whatever. Go ahead and count me in. Not like I can trust you to watch your own. You stare at statistically, somebody's got to. Might as well be me. Goddamn it. You met Ino once, and she turned you into a pervert. Shithead, you really must be as stupid as you say you are. Who's the one that you've had teaching you all kinds of shit? What the is your name for him? The wheels in Naruto's brain kept turning, until they finally stopped clicking into place. Ero Sennin. What does he do in his free time? Right, terrible smut. Wait a second, are you saying that traveling with me and Ero Sennin turned you into a perv? I mean, waking up with you're on my crotch, or you're on my, didn't exactly hurt any. Don't even pretend you're not the one trying to cuddle me in your sleep. Oh, yeah, like you didn't condition me for it by using my back as a makeshift kotatsu every night for 2 months. For a ninja that claimed to be as stupid as Naruto did, the boy certainly had a way of coming up with excellent points for his arguments. Anyway, though, I'll let Ero Sennin know you said yes. Naruto Oni, what do you mean you'll be disappearing for a while? Ray looked heartbroken. Ero Sennin, Tayuya-chan and I, are gonna be going to Mizu no Kuni for a little bit. Don't worry, just stay here with Oboro Obaa-chan and keep learning everything you can. Maybe then you'll be able to beat me. The red-headed woman nodded, having already agreed to the plan. But, Naruto Oni, we don't wanna be strong enough to beat you. Kuga said, surprising the blonde. Then why are you training? To protect you and Oboro Okaa-san. Ray said, and both of the twins gave the biggest smiles they could. What kind of clan head doesn't have guards? The phrase, clan head, made Naruto's head spin. Me. Not Oboro Obaa-chan. Though the woman was only in her late 20s, physically, she had crushed the reflexive idea that he called her that as an insult. Besides, he was her mago, her first and only grandson. That alone was reason enough to allow him to refer to her so casually. While the twins were like her own children, despite the fact that they were chronologically far older than her, she treated Naruto almost as if he were an adult of equal standing with her. No, Naruto, she said, I was married to him. It wouldn't be my place to take the position. All the Uzumaki I knew are dead, and their spirits belong to the village. I can't leave this place. But you have a home in Konoha. You have people to go back to, people to fight for in flesh, not just memory. You can rebuild the foundations of our clan there, and leave Uzushio's memory to the dead it belongs to. Uzushio is just buildings. Naruto countered. When you've stripped all the equipment and stored it away, when the village's forbidden scroll is gone, and when no people are left, buildings. Memories. But the soul of the Uzumaki rests in those of us who are still alive. Each of us carries the hopes and dreams of all the Uzumaki who got us to this point. He thought of his mother, sacrificing her life to help her husband seal the Kyuubi away inside of a boy they couldn't have known for more than a couple hours. For the good of the village, and the love of a son, they had given him the greatest power in the world, a biju, sealed in his stomach. It had made him feared and hated in Konoha, but it had given him the strength to stand and live on his own. For Naruto, there were no gods and no masters, only the knowledge that his parents did the best they could with what they had, and the idea that he could follow in his father's footsteps. Well said. Oboro smiled. And exactly the reason why I decided to let it fall to you to be the new clan head. On the one hand, he didn't feel old enough to actually be a clan head. When he thought of the ones he knew in Konoha, all of them were in their mid-20s or older, he was still a decade behind them all. On the other hand, he'd never known enough Uzumaki for there to have been a clan of them. That second thought made him smile. Anything else? Before you leave, I want to teach you the contents of the Forbidden Scroll. They're your techniques, or at least, they will be when you formally become our clan head. Knowing your aptitude for learning, it shouldn't take more than a couple days. And you too, she looked at the twins, giving a fake glare, aren't allowed to know any of them. Ah, they both pouted. Okaa-san, that means you have to train us extra special while Naruto Oni isn't here. Yes, children, I know. She smiled. Now, Mago-kun, it's time for you and I to get to work. Naruto's smile matched hers. There was one other thing he'd need to take before he left, if for no other reason than paying homage to his lost family, but he could get that later. My informant will be coming by boat, but we should probably water walk out to somewhere that it won't be split apart by the lightning around the village. Water walk on the ocean? Are you crazy? Tayuya questioned him. No, but he is. Jiraiya pointed at Naruto. When he makes shadow clones, each one gets an equal portion of his chakra, and his reserves are beyond massive. A clone can carry me, and he can carry you. That sounds a little more like abusing my ability to expend chakra at will, rather than a plan. Whatever, I'll do it. A single cage bunshin appeared, picking up Jiraiya and blasting off into the water as the Sannin directed. Your turn, Tayuya-chan. Once he had her riding piggyback, he took off. After almost an hour of racing along the waves, they made their way to a small strip of an island where they could rest. Naruto's clone dispersed, and from there it was a waiting game for the boat to arrive. They didn't have to wait long. While it wasn't moving incredibly quickly, the boat appeared on the horizon within 15 minutes. Wait a minute, is that? No, never mind, it can't be. Naruto said, squinting as he tried to make out who was steering the small ship. You might be surprised. Jiraiya said, the boat getting closer. Mist began to surround them, and that was when Naruto knew for certain. There are 8 targets. A voice emanated from all around them, and Naruto grinned. Throat, spine, lungs, liver, jugular vein, subclavian artery, kidney, heart. All too many choices, and not enough to go around. So tell me, Gaki, which one should I strike first? Good to see you too, you browless wonder. How's Haku? I'm doing well, Naruto-san. The masked hunter said, though the mist kept them from seeing him. As soon as it had appeared, the mist vanished, showing a beached ship and the 2 Kiri Nukenin. You know, when Jiraiya said that he was bringing help with him, I didn't expect that you would be the help. Zabuza said, armor tape covering his throat and lower face. I really hope you've improved since the last time we met, because those simple tricks won't be enough to make it against the Kurigakure elite. The Mizukage's highest ranks have been crippled thanks to our secession and a few well-placed kills on my part, but the rank-and-file ninjas still remember our village's reputation as the Jakiri. They won't hold back on you, so all that playing nice you did on the bridge with Haku won't make it. Don't worry about me. Didn't you already fail to assassinate the Mizukage once? Yeah, and that attack is the one that set off the rebellion. If I'd had Haku with me before I tried to kill him, I might have succeeded. Yeah. Regrets can sit in the past. Tayuya said. Don't we need to keep going? Who's your girl, Gaki? I like her. Much better than the pink one. I'm not. He's just teasing. Haku said, removing his mask. Geez, Haku, you really need to get a scar or something. Naruto said, looking at the Oinen's effeminate face. Everybody's going to keep thinking you're a girl, and your voice doesn't help. You're a boy, Tayuya and Jiraiya both said at once. Is that so surprising? Don't take this the wrong way, but you are literally the prettiest boy I have ever seen in my life. I thought you were a girl the first time I saw you. Oh, Zabuza-sama, is that the reason I wear the mask? It's a little less unnerving. Also, it's good for our cover. The ocean was calm, and the sailing went smoothly once they finally set out. Zabuza made hand signs for a jutsu Naruto didn't know, and after a warning to brace themselves tightly, their boat raced forward on the waves. On the edge of Kurigakure's territory, inside a concealed cave, the trio of Konoha's ninjas sat with the leaders of the rebellion against the Mizukage. Tayuya was between the 2 men, with Naruto on her left and Zabuza on his left. On Jiraiya's right sat a man with a metal patch bolted over each of his eyes, the kind of injury that needed that sort of attention must have been incredibly fearsome, the younger ninja thought. To Jiraiya, it spoke of how powerful he had to be that he could fight competently without use of either eye. Finally, between the 2 men who served as her guard, sat the leader of the rebellion, Terumi Mei. Nobody in the room, Tayuya included, would have failed to note that she was stunningly attractive. Her strapless blue dress covered only the bottom half of her bust, with a mesh armor rising above from underneath it that covered up the rest of her ribs. In addition, the dress was relatively short, its end came at the middle of her thighs, almost as though it was designed to be alluring. Only 3. She seemed somewhat disappointed, clearly having hoped for more. Be that as it may, Mei-san, the three of us will be more helpful than 3 or 4 platoons, or more, of Konoha's rank and file. You know me, of course, but as for these two. Jiraiya grinned. Naruto, with his grandfather Josuke's Uzushio Hitai tied around his forehead, gave a matching smirk. Chunin, Uzumaki Naruto, at your service. Junin, Kitamon no Tayuya. They're the two strongest ninja without big names that you'll find in Konoha. Mostly. Naruto's a champion of stealth and misdirection, as well as a ninjutsu specialist. He's managed to evade full Anbu patrols in broad daylight. Tayuya is a genjutsu specialist, maybe even the best one I know. She defected from Orochimaru after he left her for dead. Both of them can use Suiden and Raiden techniques, though Tayuya's primary affinity is Doden and Naruto has affinities for Futon and Kaden on top of those two. 4 natures. The eye-patch-wearing man said. Akeke Genkai, or, Aokun, don't pry. Every village has its secrets. Mei admonished him. It wasn't a stretch to believe she was talking about whatever might be under those eye patches. No, it's fine. Naruto said. Tell me, though, is it true that the Mizukage is the Sanbi Jinchuriki? Yes. The Rokubi Jinchuriki is allied with him as well, and we have word that Kumogakure is sending both of their Jinchuriki, the Nibi and Hachibi, to fight with him. Zabuza said. Naruto laughed. And you tried to assassinate him? God, Nan Mayuj-san, you're almost as dumb as I am. Zabuza-kun, you know the boy. He and his squad were sent to protect a man that Haku and I were hired to kill. Even though it's because I underestimated him, he managed to beat me as a fresh genin. Not gonna lie, Gaki, my pride is still a little hurt at that. Kakashi-sensei did most of the work. You tired each other out, and right when I was about to have you. My condolences, Naruto-kun, but I wasn't going to let Zabuza-sama die. Nah, you're fine. Naruto laughed at Haku's statement. But, to answer Ao-san's question, yes. I'm a Jinchuriki, just like both of the other Konoha-born Uzumaki were. Which one? The Kyuubi no Kitsune. I've already stomped the Aikibi's host, so now I guess I'll get to see how I stack up against Jinchuriki who actually have some level of control over their demons. Well, that's one mystery solved. Yeah, maybe you'll get the chance to avenge your honor in a Kenjutsu match someday. The blonde ninja leaned forward, chin on his hands and elbows on the table's edge, looking at the woman who was technically his new commander. So, when do I get to show you what I can do? This war wasn't like the great wars he'd read about, full platoons engaging in combat against the enemy. This was find and assassinate, the true face of guerrilla warfare. Naruto was a natural at this, with the ability to mask his real presence from sensors as merely one more among his throng of Kage Bunshin. Hiding from all others, based purely on his ability to go undetected, was a piece of cake to the blonde shinobi. Tayuya's invisibility genjutsu, as well as Jiraiya's Kato Hikari no Jutsu, the transient light technique, provided a double-layered boost to his evasiveness if he needed it. Combined with his clones to kunai henge trick, he gave off the illusion that he could be anywhere at any time. His agility giving him ample dodge time, and an enemy's inability to distinguish whether they were fighting a shadow clone or the genuine article made it seem like he could never be killed. After all, he didn't have to be the smartest or the strongest ninja on the battlefield in order to be the winner, he just had to be the last man standing. One day, a little more than 2 weeks after he'd come to Kurigakure, Mei approached him where he sat, and placed herself down with enough space to be considered formal, as her future position of Mizukage would dictate if they won this civil war. Oi, Mei-chan, you don't have to sit that far away if you don't want to. What did you want? He looked up from his dinner of rice with mashed vegetables, the thin broth soaking up most of the flavor. I wanted to check on you. A good leader should know the people they led. Some of my other soldiers tell me that you haven't been eating much, just 1 meal a day. Are you alright? Huh? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I can subsist off of the Kyuubi's chakra for 2 or 3 days straight without needing to eat something. It's not healthy, to be honest, but it conserves your resources and I'll still manage to come out on top. Why, do you think I've been acting more aggressively than normal? No, I was just wondering. I also came to thank you for fighting with us. Even though only 3 of you came to help us, you've been monumental in turning this war around. We were struggling just to hold on before you arrived, and now it feels like we're on equal footing with Yagura's forces. I'm just doing the right thing. He said. For ninja, morality is a very dark gray at best, and non-existent at worst. That having been said, I'm happy that the good people have always come out on top in every conflict I've been part of. If we're lucky, then we'll manage to keep that streak alive. Also, I may have gone behind Arrow Sennin's back and tried to get a little backup. Don't expect more than another 3-man cell, though. All that proves is that Jiraiya was right to bring you, then. People like you are rare, and I'm glad to have you on our side. If you're interested, I'd be more than willing to give you a position as a Junin of Kurigakure when we win. You've more than proven your capability. Now you're just flattering me. Naruto grinned. Am I being buttered up like a lobster? What's next? An attempt to flirt your irresistible way into my heart. He ignored the idea that it could be because he was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Mei was political, she would be a strong Mizukage, but she wasn't shallow. Oh, I'm irresistible, am I? How would that redhead feel if she heard that? The woman had a predatory smirk on her face, and Naruto knew she meant Tayuya. She'd probably try to gut me with the solid end of her flute. Enough tries, and she might even succeed. He laughed. What's the situation with you two, anyway? You sleep in the same cot, you practically breathe the same air, and neither of you is far behind the other on the battlefield. And you need to get better spies, I've seen every one that's watched me. Ao was a bit difficult to find, but when he charges chakra to those hidden eyes of his. I don't know how the hell he got a Byakugan, and I don't really want to find out whose it was beforehand. What I want to know is, what the hell is underneath the other eye patch? That's a secret he hasn't even told me. Mei admitted. Still, you're avoiding the question. Did something happen with you two? Something's been going on the whole time, pretty much. Naruto sighed. Giving her the short version, he brought Mei up to speed on his not relationship with Tayuya. So you're afraid of what will happen once you commit to her fully, based on a pattern of attachment, and she's worried that horrors from her past will prevent her from giving you the attention you feel like you deserve. Yeah, basically. We decided we would hold off on anything official until we managed to feel like we were ready, and good enough for one another. There was silence for a moment before Mei spoke again, and the pause carried weight behind it as the words sank in. Would you like to hear a story? It would be rude to refuse such a beautiful woman. He said, and Mei giggled. Maybe he'd been wrong, when he talked to Tenten all those months ago. Maybe all his time with Jiraiya was actually making him succeed in the area where the perverted hermit was a self-admitted abject failure. Learning by negative example, as it were. I'm 29, and I've never had a man to call my own. She began. A large part of that has to deal with the bloodline purges that ended with the Sandaime Mizukage's death 2 decades ago, after which I didn't have to keep my Kekkei Genkei hidden any longer. As flirtatious as I am, and as revealing as my clothes are, no man is willing to get close to me in a romantic sense. I'm sure you know about the tradition that gave our village the derogatory moniker, Jakiri. Yeah, and it ended when Zabuza butchered an entire graduating class at the age of 6. The phrase, bloody mist, was infamous. That was the year after I graduated. In any event, I was paired, during my academy training, with a boy my own age. His name was Ryuma. Unlike Konoha, in those days, Kiri's academy training began at 4 years old, and we graduated at 10. Ryuma was a boy who I ate every meal with, who I slept in the same bunk with, who I trained and studied and laughed and cried with. And, on the day of our graduation exam, I killed him with my first attack. He didn't try to block it, and I asked him why. She could still remember the look on his face. He told me that it was because he loved me, too much to kill me, so he had made up his mind to die in my place. As he fell off of my kunai, I told him I loved him too. Ever since that day, no man has willingly approached me unless it had to deal with the mission at hand. Even Ao and Zabuza, loyal as they might be, are afraid of what would come from getting close to me. All that browless wonder is afraid of is sitting down at a blackjack table and finding me at the dealer's spot. Naruto joked, and his attempt to dissolve the tension paid off when Mei laughed. You really are one of a kind. She said. You're not worried about what my flirting could do to you. Oh, the horror of falling in love with someone. What's the worst that could happen? There's never a better bet than me, even though I doubt I'll fall for you. I'll be 16 in about a month, and that's a total generation's age gap. Besides, I don't doubt that there's a man out there for you. Might not know him, and he might not even be here right now, but I promise you he's out there. The uplifting words brought a genuine smile to the rebel leader's face, and she swept the bangs away from her right eye to show her full face. If you'd like my advice, take what you can have with her. Mei said. Regrets, like death, are something that plague every ninja throughout their life. If she dies tomorrow, I know you'll regret not having loved her in the time you had her. It would be the same for her, in the event that you die. A war zone may not be the best of places, or full of opportunities, but it's important to live with as few regrets as you can. Mei looked like she wanted to continue, but the earthen ceiling of their underground base shook enough to loosen and drop small bits of soil onto the floor beneath them. Oh, no. All of you, prepare for battle. She stood, running off. Hey, red bitch. Hey, needle. Tayuya and Zabuza, much to the discomfort of anyone nearby, had developed their friendly rapport by insulting one another, or mutual acquaintances. Naruto, as usual, took the worst hit. Piss-haired Gaki was perhaps the most infuriating thing he'd ever been called. So, what's up with you and the Gaki? Is something up with us? Well, Mei-sama wanted me to check in with you, see if something was wrong. The way you two live, it's like you're practically married, but anytime someone brings up that fact you both back off like a dog who just got its nose full of porcupine quills. It's complicated. I was sent on a mission to kill a man that boy protected. He was about to turn my into grass, and now he's out here, one-shotting half of the Mizukage's men. Everything ninja do is complicated as hell, girl. Hearing some tragic love story isn't going to faze me. Fine, asshole. Tayuya groaned. This is gonna take a while, though. I've got all the time in the world. Shoot. Somehow, the infamous demon of the mist still seemed threatening even while he relaxed. He made a good bodyguard. Well, it all started when Jiraiya rescued me. I was about to die, but he saw that I was still alive and he picked me up. I was on a mission to stop Naruto's team from intercepting Uchiha Sasuke from defecting to Orochimaru, and I almost had one of his teammates until this bitch from Sunagaku arrived and used a futon jutsu to drop half of a goddamn forest on me. So then, we get back to Konoha after he succeeds with his mission and I fail mine, and I spend a night in the hospital before it's decided that I'll be jailed via house arrest, not a prison cell with visits from Morino Ibiki and his interrogation goons. Guess whose house I stayed in? That name drop got Zabuza's attention. Morino Ibiki had been captured by Kurigakure in the Third Great War, and was tortured for 2 months without success until the war's end and his return to Konoha after an exchange of all POWs took place under ceasefire. And then, it was decided that since Naruto was gonna leave the village on this bullshit trip with Birdshit Sensei, I came along for the ride, since technically the Hokage's orders were that I would have to go wherever he did, and vice versa. Even though we've gotten very close over the course of the trip, and it's supposed to go for more than 2 years past this point, we're both scared to take it past the point where we're at. That sounds ridiculous. Zabuza said. What's so bad that it could keep the two of you from enjoying life together? Every time Naruto's gotten really attached to someone, something bad has happened to him. He gave up a home and a family so that a different girl could have one, so he lived on the street for 15 years before he finally ended up renting out the top floor of a brothel to use as his apartment. He had a crush on that pink-haired girl and she ended up using him as a punching bag for just about every day of their lives until he finally got serious about being stronger. Sasuke, he considers his best friend, and that son of a bitch put 2 holes in his chest with the Chidori. And you're not the type to get dissuaded easily. I've seen you turn some other boys down, more than once. I was one of Orochimaru's personal guards. I was partially responsible for the death of the Sandaime Hokage, someone who Naruto thinks of as a grandfather. And when you're in Orochimaru's service, you do whatever he tells you to do unless you want to wind up dead, or on the operating table for his latest experiment. Sometimes, those happen anyway. I've been hopped up on so many pain meds in such high doses that half my nerves don't work right. I haven't been able to feel my legs like I used to, before I had all those trees dropped on me. When I get really, really mad, this goddamn seal eats up all my resolve like a biju until I'm a slave to my own negative emotions. And that's not counting all the experiments they did to me, all the times they tried to do something or another. Quote. I don't have very many memories from before I was an Oto Kunoichi. They're buried deep enough that they might as well not be there. I don't really want to remember what my life was like before that hell. But what I do remember is enough to tell me that they took an innocent little girl and turned her into a demonic killing machine. I woke up in the middle of the night, more times than I can count, to a bunkmate getting ready to kill me. I don't want that to happen to him, I care too much. I care too much about him to let that happen. Then you have to control it, just like he controls the Kyuubi inside of him. Zabuza offered. Jiraiya's a Fuinjutsu master, I guarantee you he should have something to block it from influencing you until you can get it removed. I can't tell you what to do about your memories, but I don't see why you and he can't be together, even now. Sure, being together and not having worked through your problems could come back to bite you in the long run, but you don't have to fly solo, either. Nobody will tell you too that you can't help each other out of your own little private hells. You might even find that it brings you a lot closer to take your burdens and share them. He's a good kid, I'm sure he'll agree to the idea if you press the issue enough. The Kurigakure no Oni stood and walked away, hoping that he'd manage to sway Tayuya to one decision or another. The rumbling of the ground around them was all the warning that they would get, regarding the danger nearing them from the surface. Yugura's army was out in full force, clearly looking to eradicate the rebellion once and for all. With a savage grin at that revelation, Naruto performed a fast henge and went up, while his own clones modified their transformed appearance. Handing them out and preparing his falcons, he laughed. Like father, like son, throw on my signal. He told the rebels already above ground, and they passed more out to those who were still coming up. And when they return, keep throwing. If we're lucky, we won't have to fight a full-scale battle. It was easy to wait until they were well within throwing range. After all, he had God knows how many clones transformed into the appearance of his father's signature triple-pronged kunai. Fire. There were a great many ninja in Krigakure who'd heard of the man known as the Kiro Senko. There were some, attending this battle, who'd seen him in action during the Third Great War. They knew that those kunai, arcing to land in front and behind them meant death. His falx was in his right hand, and he had a Rasengan charged in his left. To all the world, and all those watching him, he was Namikaze Minato's vengeful ghost who had come upon them. Though her death had weighed much more heavily on her teammate, Hitaki Kakashi, it was no secret that Nohara Rin's death had come at the hands of Kiri Nin. Fall back, an unknown ninja yelled, and some in the group wheeled around, only to come face to face with Tayuya, who didn't even need a henge to pull off the look of Uzumaki Kushina. Tayuya weaved arbitrary hand seals, and Naruto summoned chakra chains that ran through cross-sections of their enemies. Without warning, he used a kawarimi with one of his transformed clones and swung his sword, all while willing his chains to move and kill more of the Mizukage's loyal forces. Tayuya vanished out of range in a shunshin that left Naruto alone within the enemy group, and in seconds they were surrounded by dozens of the blonde man's clones. While most of the enemy died, two began to flee. Preparing himself, he asked the watching Mei a question. How many men does it take to deliver a message? Their message was received a long time ago, imposter. A voice came from behind Naruto, and the sharp end of a hooked battle staff rested against the blonde's throat. Seeing no reason to continue using his henge, Naruto let it drop, though there wasn't much of a difference between the truth and the illusion. Why would Konoha aid the rebellion? Because it's the right thing to do. A tyrannical Kage who believes himself above the law must be eliminated. Yugura found himself with a kunai touching the skin between his shoulder blades, one of Naruto's clones perfectly ready to kill Yugura in an instant. And yet, those who defy their Kage are traitors whose only reward is death. It seems that we're at a moral impasse. Would you suggest a battle to see whose will is stronger? Oh, please, as though a biju whose tail count is as low as the Sanbi could threaten me. Naruto's clone was destroyed, and in that instant both Jinchuriki leapt away. Get them all out of here, we're about to have a landscaping meeting. Naruto joked to Tayuya, who paled. Slight problem with that, piss brain. A gargantuan force, several times larger than the one Naruto had slaughtered, had made its way to the clearing where all the rebels were gathered. At the head of that group stood 3 other ninja. While Naruto recognized none of them, he could pick out that their chakra was just like his, warped from years of hosting a biju. Oh, son of a bitch. All 4 of you. The help he'd sent for couldn't get here quickly enough. Well, I'm just gonna say what's on all of our minds here. We're, plain and simple. Zabuza said. Still, I may be able to even the odds a little bit. I know there are 5 Jinchuriki here, but they don't call me a demon without reason. They call you that for your lethality and your temper, Zabuza-sama. Not your overwhelming power. Goddammit, Haku, play along. 1,000 apologies, Zabuza-sama. If you think you can do something, Jiraiya said, then go ahead and do it. I'm all ears for a plan, and there's absolutely no way that Naruto will manage to take on 4 enemy Jinchuriki by himself. Are you doubting me? The blonde said, to the shock of all those who hadn't noticed his presence. Yagura's over there fighting one of my clones. Honest to God, I have enough of them in different henge techniques that it could take him hours to finish all of them off. They're only good for 1 or 2 hits, but that's all the difference between them and me. They even have access to the Kyuubi's chakra. So you're telling me that, potentially, every single one of your clones could go into a full possession mode and we could have 1,000 or more copies of the Kyuubi running around? Well, not to that extent, I don't think. But they can all draw on its power without affecting my ability to pull from it. Naruto could see a blot of brown on the horizon, in the air. Help was coming. Wait, you're holding off the Mizukage, the Sanbi Jinchuriki, with nothing but shadow clones. Are you joking? Zabuza seemed dubious. Well, is he killing us right now? I don't think so, which means he's being held off. So, yeah, just a few clones. You're bullshitting. Please tell me you're bullshitting. Jiraiya was incredulous. He knew that Naruto had held off the Ikibi Jinchuriki during the invasion of Konoha. That had been how he really earned his Chunin promotion, but to keep a Jinchuriki at bay who had full power over their biju. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, Ero Sennin. Just remember that my ability to evade logic is what gives me the power to win, no matter the odds. So, time for a show. Again, you, get the hell out of here. Oh no you don't. You can have all the fun once I'm finally through living. Until then, I'm gonna kill my enemies. Ao rotated his left eye patch up, and Naruto saw the secret that he'd been keeping so desperately. Not only did he have a Byakugan, but a Sharingan as well. The thought that he could have and use both Kekkei Genkai congruently without having been born into either one, it was mildly terrifying. The kind of mental fortitude it would take had to be massive. His name was Uchiha Shisui. The blue-haired man said, noticing Naruto's stare. And he had a particular strength for mind-altering jutsu. I can use it to forcefully override one of the enemy Jinchuriki's brains if I make eye contact with them, to make them join our side. I can only use it once, though, and the one with sunglasses can't be affected. That's the Hachibi Jinchuriki, younger brother of the Raikage. He'll be our biggest concern, even more than Yagura. The other 2 are Utakata, the Rokubi, and Yugito, the Nibi. Jiraiya said. Do you have a preference? Ao asked Mei. No. Whichever one makes eye contact first, that's the one you need to go for. Don't waste your time hunting for one or the other. Remind me again why we literally just crossed the whole continent, plus an ocean, to get here. Karasu is gonna get water in its joints. Shut up, Konkuro. We're here because the Cage told us to come with him. Tamari groaned, and she would have smacked her younger brother over the side of their ride were it not for the fact that it would have been a long drop. They had to be at least 1,000 feet in the air. I'm right here, you know. Besides, you don't have to refer to me so, formally. I know, it's just habit. Besides, you earned the title. Why shouldn't I call my little brother by his rank? Gaara smiled as his older siblings began to bicker back and forth, recalling Naruto's words during the invasion of Konoha. I fight for others because I trust that they would do the same for me. You fight for yourself because you don't believe anyone else would. One steel cable alone can be severed, but if you bundle enough of them together, you won't be able to cut through them all. He had started to collect those metaphorical cables, one by one. From above, he managed to pick out several blonde ninja attacking another, whose hair was close to the color of his sand. The Aikibi had heightened his senses, and he saw another amid several hundred other ninja, staring down a force many times larger than their own. That would be the real one. There you are. The sand beneath him opened, and Gaara rocketed down until more sand rose up from the ground to meet him. Naruto turned, saw the Aikibi Jinchuriki, and grinned. Gaara, Naruto, you mean to tell me that the aid you requested was the cage? Mei asked. And his older siblings. Naruto said as Tamari and Kankuro landed behind their brother. Introductions later. Cage Dono, we were trying to come up with a plan, since they've been gracious enough not to attack until Yagura orders it or we strike first. Do you have any ideas? I am the host of the Aikibi no Tanuki, and while the options that gives me may not seem obvious, as everyone knows, Shukaku is a sand and wind demon. Naruto. Yeah, where are we? Kurigakure. And what is Kurigakure? A collection of islands. And what do islands have? Beaches. Correct. What's on beaches? Sand. Lots, and lots, and lots of sand. Even under the ocean. Now, Naruto was getting a clearer picture. And I am an undisputed master of sand. Shukaku's chakra is not limitless, and my control over it is moderate at best, but even now, the soil over the sand in this area is very thin, despite the bedrock underneath. While it will take a massive amount of chakra, I can almost instantly grind all of that soil into sand. 2 Jinchuriki on 4, the odds were looking much better for the rebels, even if they were still enormously outmanned and outgunned. Once Ao managed to make eye contact with Utakata or Yugito, it would be an even 3-on-3 battle that all the rest could evacuate from. Those who had seen Gaara's proclivity for murdering with his element knew what would happen once he'd made this battle stage into his own arena. Try to kill as few people as possible, if you could. We're already stretched thin, I would hate to see more ninja die. Noted, but I will defend myself and my siblings. I wouldn't ask you to trade their lives. I just want as little bloodshed as possible. I understand. On my signal. 3, 2, 1. Inside the seals that contained them, 6 demons roared as one. Incongruous, raging at the setting sun, each swore that it would leave the day in victory or death. Go. The ground around them shifted into sand, which Gaara flung as mightily as he could. Be gone, he shouted, the manic look on his face something that only 3 in attendance remembered. Flee now, unless you choose to die. Ao grinned as both sides fled the battlefield. He'd managed to activate Shisui's eye on a blonde woman, the Nibi Jinchuriki. She would remain in a coma until he reactivated the technique. Yugito-chan. That sucks, man, the muscle-bound Kumo Nin said. I'm Kurabi, and it's pain you'll see since you've messed with me. Does he do this all the time? The Rokubi Jinchuriki, and the only one who had yet to introduce himself, sighed. That meant he was Utakata. Yes, unfortunately. Don't diss my rhyme, or it's slug clobberin' time. Naruto didn't read comic books, but even he knew that was copyright infringement. 2-on-3 odds were mildly better than 4-on-2, though it would have been better if Ao had fully succeeded in making one of the enemy Jinchuriki convert by force. Kurabi, brother of the Yondaime Reikage. Yagura, the Yondaime Mizukage. Kiho o Fudo no Utakata, grandson of the Nadaime Mizukage. Myself, Sabaku no Gaara, the Godaime Kazekage. Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yondaime Hokage. Damn, is this a royalty meetup? Should I get Tsunade Obaa-chan, so she can brag too? Don't disrespect ya elders, ya sand and forest dwellers. Okay, I've had about enough of whatever the hell kinda bullshit you think is coming out of your mouth. Consider this beatdown officially started. Thankfully, Jiraiya had the foresight to negate both the slog seal and the chakra limiter that Naruto still wore in the moments prior to being cast aside by Gaara's sand. With nothing but natural speed, surpassing even Kurabi's Raiden-enhanced reflexes, Naruto's Falx managed to cut a long line into the black man's face. The sword's edge had tugged along the Kumo shinobi's cheek, drawing all the way back to his neck before Naruto finished passing him. Kurabi turned, and Naruto saw the gash slowly mend in front of his eyes before leaving a scar. I can heal perfectly, but I think I'll leave that be. A reminder not to underestimate a ninja with a sword that great. Oh my god, do you ever stop? Make me take you serious, fool, ya fool. This. Kaden. San Yajirashi no Jutsu. The simply termed three-arrow technique shot one lance of flame at each of his enemies. Sabaton. Sabakukyu. Gaara smirked, dry sand wrapping around Utakata's legs until an exploding bubble shot the Kiri nin skyward. You think you can outmaneuver me? Wordlessly, the Rokubi Jinchuriki fired 3 bubbles from his long pipe, which Gaara dodged before they landed. The explosions they caused told him that his instincts had been right. Floating bubbles, my, Naruto yelled, seeing the attack, and barely dodging Yagura's hooked staff for the trouble. Utakata, keep the Aikibi busy. Kurabi and I will deal with the Kyuubi. The Mizukage stated. Gaara attempted to lash out at his fellow Kage in defiance of that directive, but more exploding bubbles destroyed the sand-based attack before it could begin. Your opponent is me. Utakata chastised the red-headed Kage, still using his pipe to create more bubbles, the upward force of which kept him floating in the air. So focus on that. Honor among thieves, as the saying goes. You won't have to worry about them until you defeat me. After all, if you can't do that much, then you don't stand a chance against either of those two. Your blood will be a perfect offering to my mother's spirit. Gaara said monotonously, the dark rings around his eyes seeming more menacing than they had before. So how long do you think you can keep me on the defensive? Naruto said, grinning. Yagura, all due respect, you don't really seem that strong. I kept you busy with a few clones for like 5 minutes. And you only killed 2 of them. What? Did they just give you the Mizukage hat out of pity? While Kurabi had managed to keep up fairly well, despite being slightly slower, Yagura was practically being left in the dust. He was younger than Naruto, and despite his Kage status, he had the stamina of a child to go along with it, or maybe he was just outclassed by Kurabi's muscle and Naruto's heritage as an Uzumaki. Silence. You have no idea what this station means. I know enough to know that you're a failure, as a Kage and a Jinchuriki. I know that you're beneath me, in power and number of tails. God, is there anything you can do right? Naruto goaded. Don't listen to him, Mizukage Dono. Kurabi said, wielding a blade in each hand. Besides, that's not even how you use a weapon with a hook, you dumb son of a bitch. This is how you do it. As the pair had chased him around, Naruto had dropped a kunai or shuriken every so many feet, and now both of his enemies were right in the center of his trap. Swinging his falx down, Naruto loaded Raiden chakra into it and sent it flying out. Raiden. Dai Raigania. The Great Lightning Field technique required metal markers in order to work, unlike its basic version which connected a circuit between whatever material Naruto placed his hands around. He felt bad about reusing the same technique and making it stronger, but it was just so goddamned useful. It wasn't like Jiraiya's nearly comical attempts to make a bigger Rasengan, which only had one purpose. He could use it as a tripwire, a rudimentary barrier technique, and even an assassination technique. While Kurabi was less fazed by the attack, due to coating himself with Raiden chakra, Yagura yelled in pain as the lightning jumped from a fallen kunai to his staff, and up his body. That was the problem about being the host of a Sweden-based Biju. Yagura was much more vulnerable to Raiden techniques. It doesn't even matter if you have a perfect relationship with the Sanbi. This place will be your grave. Naruto wished that he could believe in his words with the same certainty in which he spoke them. The Kurigakure rebels had filled him in on the fact that Kurabi and Yagura were the only 2 Jinchuriki in known history to have been in perfect sync with their Biju, something that made them infinitely more dangerous beyond their individual combat skills. Utilizing the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu for what had to be at least the millionth time in his life, he prepared to engage the 2 as their respective demons' chakra started to coat their bodies. He elected not to copy after them, wanting to see how far he could push before being forced to escalate his strength as well, though he got the feeling that Kurabi was only doing it to play along with the Mizukage, who'd been sent reeling after Naruto's last attack. One way or another, the blonde knew, he was going to hurt like hell when this battle was all said and done. Gaara was frustrated. He was tired, he was a little hungry, his bubble-blowing opponent wouldn't roll over and die. You know, the little things in life. Futon. Kyofu no Yashi. The Kage yelled, triumph in his eyes when the attack landed. Utakata spun, and wasn't fast enough to recover before grains of sand tore the Rokubi Jinchuriki's pipe apart. Come on, what was that for? Utakata said indignantly, casting the ruined weapon's pieces aside as he dropped to the ground. I'm just trying to screw around, kid. You sure you want me to get serious? If they thought you were stronger than me, they would have kept this to a mob battle. You're just a diversion so that Naruto can't have a fair fight. Out of the corners of their eyes, they saw lightning spring up from the aforementioned blonde's Dai Regania technique, and heard Yagura's pained cry. Looks like he's not doing too badly, in spite of that. You're sure I can't convince you to just leave and go somewhere? It would make my life much easier. Why are you so loyal to a tyrant? Because he wasn't responsible for his actions, but by the time we'd broken the genjutsu on him, this rebellion had already begun. All we want to do is find the one responsible and bring them to justice. The words gave Gaara pause. I am sorry. Unfortunately, it seems, both sides are in the right. The rebels want Yagura to answer for crimes he committed while placed under the control of another, and Yagura wants to end the war that shouldn't have begun in the first place. Yeah, but you're here out of loyalty to your friend, and I'm here due to the same thing. Neither of us is willing to abandon the one who got us into this mess. So we fight. Gaara acknowledged piteously, though that melancholy was soon replaced by determination. A shame, to kill one who is like a brother with this curse. A shame, to kill one so young. Utakata countered, dark chakra beginning to eat at his body. A shame, that our own senses of loyalty will be what kills us. The two renewed their battle, demons howling from within. Sweden. Suarenden. The water bullet slammed into Gaara, but the redhead didn't budge an inch as the caked sand armor fell off of him in chunks. Doden. Iwayama no Konagana no Jutsu. The crag breaker technique shot jagged earth up, attempting to trap or kill Utakata. Futon. Bakukan. True to its name, the air compressed around Utakata's fist when he swung a punch at Gaara and intentionally missed, causing an explosion due to the disturbance in the air that caught the front of Gaara's shirt. More explosions. I'm really starting to hate that sound. You're more than welcome to die. That'll stop you from having to hear it ever again. No, thank you. Then I would have to spend an eternity listening to Shukaku's depraved ramblings in hell. It was worth a shot. Don't say you didn't try. Gaara's visage changed, calm and blank as he stared at the terrain. Shukaku, can you hear me? I have a proposition for you. Gaara offered the words up to his demon. Speak, then. If I willingly start to give you control, to fight this man and his Biju, will you guarantee that you'll go back inside the seal once this battle is over? What's in it for me? The Biju answered with another question. Destroying the Rokubi in its home territory, proving your superiority. Tempting, oh, whatever, it's been at least a century since I've fought one of its containers. Let me at him. Gaara's eyes changed, black sclera defined by the golden iris of the Aikibi. He couldn't be stopped. Kurabi's increased speed in his first stage Biju cloak actually outpaced Naruto enough that the blonde had charged his own body with Raiden chakra in order to keep up, with Yagura lagging behind due to his earlier wounds. Apparently, the Sanbi couldn't heal his wounds. All of Naruto's shadow clones had been destroyed, leaving the blonde to face his adversaries alone. Kurabi had begun wielding a third sword in his mouth, in the Santoryu Kenjutsu style made famous during the Warring Clans era. Naruto's enlarged falx was big enough to block all attacks from the burly Kumo Nin, but he would be in trouble if the two shinobi got any more serious. You know, I don't know what kind of creature you'd call the Hachibi, but I guarantee you. Naruto leapt away, sheathing his falx and running through a series of hand seals. No matter what it is, I think it'll be big enough for 1,000 birds to eat. The Chidori came to life in Naruto's hand, every nerve in his body lighting up to move just in time to avoid a would-be lethal blow from the hooked end of Yagura's staff. Uzushio's village symbol shone on the blonde ninja's forehead, and even if these two had been born long after its destruction, they still belonged to two of the responsible parties. That's a lot of lightning, but your jutsu isn't frightening. Mr. 9, we're doing fine. How Kurabi managed to speak at all, let alone clearly, with a sword between his teeth. Naruto wasn't sure he wanted to know. It didn't help that the other shinobi's rapping was awful. Charging the Kyuubi's chakra into his arm, the Chidori turned as red as it had been when he debuted his knowledge of the attack against Jiraiya. In seconds, the chirping songbirds had been phased out and replaced with the raucous screaming of carrion birds. You guys should really pay more attention to where I leave my weapons, and if they're really weapons, and separating yourselves from the weakest member of your group. Be back in a few. Naruto threw a smoke pellet down before initiating his Kawarimi, and 6 of his clones surrounded the allied pair of Jinchuriki. Naruto didn't worry about how he'd get back, though. He'd already planted another clone in the ground around them, hiding on the ground as a shuriken that looked far too old to have been placed recently. Of course, keeping that as a contingency plan was a nice idea too. He decided that he would shunshin back to his battle with Kurabi and Yagura. When he arrived to help Gaara against his foe, he saw 2 half-possessive Biju smashing into one another, practically without jutsu. Gaara was in his half-transformed state, and Utakata had entered into the second stage of his Biju cloak, with 4 tails active. Demonic chakra, so concentrated and heavy that it appeared to be black, covered his whole body and seemed to drip off of him like water from a showerhead that had only just turned off. Naruto! Gaara yelled, which was all the warning Utakata would get before a demon-infused Chidori nearly ran through his gut. Utakata didn't bother to dodge, and the most powerful technique that Naruto knew failed to pierce the Rokubi Jinchuriki's skin. Jumping away before his enemy could lash out in revenge, Naruto looked to his friend for a plan. Don't kill him. I promise, Yagura has his reasons. He can't be spared, not when the rebellion has come this far, but he's not evil. This one, though, he can be left alive. Kiri will need all the help it can get rebuilding their village. With a somber look in his eyes, Naruto nodded. I learned a demon restrainment technique that I could use in the event that something like this happened. Do you think you can keep him busy for a few minutes? This is going to take somewhere between a quarter to half of my chakra, looking at how far he's already gone. Gaara nodded, and leapt into another round of melee with his fellow Jinchuriki. Closing his eyes, Naruto focused purely on his chakra and began to run through the hand seals necessary to complete the jutsu. As more of his clones appeared, each one running through a different set of seals than the one before, he saw both of the other Jinchuriki after opening his eyes to gauge the distance he'd need to travel. Fuin. Enma no Niju Roku Kanajuchi. The 26 hammers of Enma was one of Uzushio's kinjutsu techniques, and could place any target in a death-like sleep until its caster either died or unsealed the victim. The only catch was, it required more chakra to use depending on the intended victim's chakra levels. Clearly, the idea had been to make sure that no Uzumaki could fall victim to their own technique. In a burst of speed, Naruto moved forward to slap Utakata across the back, and the effect was immediate. The man's chakra cloak disappeared, and he fell unconscious before hitting the ground. The drain on Naruto's chakra was just as immediate, and he winced. The ceiling had taken much closer to half of his chakra than the quarter he'd been hoping for. On the other hand, he still had plenty more, and he'd eliminated one of their enemies. Time to go play the fair fighting game. Hope you're ready, Gaara. The Kazekage nodded, and both ninja performed a fast shunshin that had them vanish from their fallen brother's side. Miss me, assholes. Naruto grinned, with Gaara standing beside him. Now it's a little more fair, 2 on 2. Utakata. What did you do to him? Yagura growled. I shoved a Chidori through his gut. Left a big asshole in it, too. Don't suppose he heals like me, though, does he? You bastard. I'll kill you. Yagura screamed, his body being taken over by the Sanbi as he transformed into a full possession. In a matter of seconds, the demon turtle was alive in the flesh again. Oh, that's not good. Kurabi said, not rhyming for the first time in the 15 minutes that Naruto had known him. New mission, objective understood. Goddammit. New mission, I'm gonna pacify the demon, get Yugito and get to leavin'. Of course, the Raikage wouldn't risk his 2 strongest soldiers on a mission to aid a tyrant. If things were looking a little hairier than anticipated, it wouldn't have made sense for either of the 2 to die so far from home. Better to save themselves, particularly in this war that wasn't even theirs to interfere with. Naruto could relate, but he wouldn't have abandoned the rebels he'd fought beside. For better or worse, he was one of them. You know, Yagura seems a little unhinged. More than a cage should be. No offense, Gara. None taken. The reason, or at least the one Utakata told me when we fought, is because he was placed under a mind-altering genjutsu that caused him to commit the atrocities that led to this rebellion. The Sanbi's roar returned the pair to the battle at hand, and Kurabi sighed. Yo, Cage, let's transform all the way. There's no need for you to do that. Gara said, San building him up until the genuine Shukaku stood before them. I've told you, as long as I have sand, I am invincible. From offshore, a tower of sand shot upward with more force than was probably necessary, collecting itself into a gigantic ball. The tide had fallen a full foot from the action, but Gara wasn't concerned with that. Kurabi and Naruto ducked behind Shukaku's legs as the sandy murder ball dropped down with enough force to crush a mountain. Their silent hopes were dashed when a bright burst of light signaled that the Sanbi had unleashed a Bijudama. The blast tore through all the wet sand, making it explode outwards and ensuring that the Sanbi remained unharmed. Oh, this isn't gonna be fun. Shukaku spat wind, forming a cyclone that began tearing its way through the forest around them. The Sanbi countered with a wall of boiling water, which set trees on fire when it hit them. You know, Mr. 9, it's time for us to shine. We can't let them have all the fun, or else we three can't crush that one. Naruto growled, his expression turning feral as violent thoughts began to fill his mind. Throughout the fog of grim wishes, one directive stood out more than the rest. Kill. Two tails of chakra exploded out behind his body, red chakra racing across his skin as dark power flowed through him. His eyes were red with slit pupils, finger and toenails transformed into claws, and his teeth had turned canid in nature. The sharp teeth resembled a Kiri Nukenin Naruto had once met, Hoshigaki Kisame, though that was all the similarity they shared. With a loud shout, though the sound was very near to a bark, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki gathered more of his Biju's power. His arms moved, controlled by the demon inside, and the voice that was his and yet not his spoke. Zenten. Shinra no Tenkan no Jutsu. The technique wasn't one that Naruto had ever heard of before, let alone used. What was, all-natured, supposed to mean? Furthermore, what could the Kyuubi do with? Naruto paused his thought process for a moment, realizing that by channeling the Kyuubi's chakra and giving it a manual override to his limbs, he'd effectively given it access to its own power source. Thankfully, a Biju's chakra couldn't undo the seal it had been placed under, so he was safe from at least one threat in the world. A great rumbling was heard in the sky overhead, and Naruto understood why the jutsu held the name, Heavenly Fist of the Omnipresent God. Burning through the atmosphere, a meteorite smashed down into the ground near them, sending Kurabi flying and knocking the Aikibi over when the shockwave touched them. Shielded by virtue of the fact that he technically cast the jutsu, he watched as the Sanbi spun end over end until it managed to right itself. Kurabi seemed content to stay hidden, almost seeming to say that he wanted to see just how strong Naruto was as a Jinchuriki. Gaara, on the other hand, was awoken and knocked out by the force of the blast. Shukaku had vanished, and the red-headed Cage was lost somewhere amid the vast desert he'd created. That was badass. Naruto communicated telepathically. You're fighting my brethren. You can't utilize my full strength with all these seals in place, but it would leave a very poor mark on my reputation if you died against this weakling. The control he was placed under has caused him to lose most of his power, and even my sibling demon hasn't regained its full abilities yet. The response surprised Naruto, as the Kyuubi generally chose to ignore Naruto's infrequent attempts to talk. Got anything else up your sleeve? Always. Zenten. Mu Juryu Sancho no Jutsu. The weightless mountain peak began, a slim point rising up from the ground beneath the Sanbi to pierce all the way through it and continue rising, its base ever widening and carrying the Sanbi further into the air. Finally, it snapped, sending the demon careening into the ground. That's the most of my strength that you can safely use right now. Your body will need to take a break from my chakra before it can handle my more intensive techniques. Internally, Naruto paled at the idea that the Kyuubi considered meteor pulling and mountain creating techniques to be minor jutsu, and he still didn't know what the hell Zenten was supposed to mean. As Naruto's Biju cloak faded, the Sanbi slammed head first into the ground, the damage from two high-magnitude land-altering techniques on the heels of one another being too great to continue sustaining itself. Yugura stood in its place as it disappeared, his body fully healed. With a series of mixed, conflicting emotions in his eyes, he spoke. Well, at the very least, thank you for that. Your defeat of the Sanbi shook off the last vestiges of the mind control technique I was placed under. The difference in attitude was enough proof that he was telling the truth. The man before Naruto stood with the poise and calmness befitting a cage, the hooked staff held loosely in his hand and with a gentle smile on his face. I'm sorry we had to meet as enemies, Uzumaki Naruto. He said. I'm sure that, had you been my ally, the rebellion could have been ended peacefully once you touched my mind. I'm sorry you were controlled. The Konoha nin offered. I'm sorry that your position, and my alliance, make us do what we're about to. As Mizukage, I cannot allow the secession of such a significant portion of my forces. Even though their number is small, the talents they possess far outmatch most of those still loyal to me. My duty as the leader of Kurigakure is to keep my village united, however I must. Then only one of us is coming out alive. Naruto's sealed falx rested comfortably in his right hand, and utter silence fell over the land that watched over both of the still-standing Jinchuriki. The hush was a prelude to bloodshed. No matter what, one of them would die today, and neither had resolved that it could be anyone but their enemy. At a signal that neither knew, yet both understood, the Yondaime Mizukage and the head of the Uzumaki clan rushed forward to claim their destiny. The metal of their weapons clashed against one another, neither giving way to the other's power. Silently, as he wove back and forth before continuing to strike, Naruto weighed his options. His Suiten and Kaden techniques were out of the question. Yugura, as the Sanbi Jinchuriki, had a level of mastery over water like Gaara's inhuman control over sand. Now, with the Mizukage at the height of his power, attempting to subvert that would be suicidal. Raiden techniques were his best bet in this situation, but he had very few of those available. The Reigania required him to get a hand on Yugura, and the Chidori was too risky to attempt wielding against an enemy with enhanced reflexes. That left a couple other options, but those required a few more hand seals than he had time for. Yugura's reflexes had caught up to Naruto since the Sanbi's recession, and the blonde hated it. He'd liked Yugura better when the younger man had been unable to keep up, but Naruto continued thinking. Their kenjutsu skills were practically even, though the advantage went to Yugura for the moment as Naruto's falx was sealed into its smaller form. Linked to the Kyuubi's withdrawn chakra, it would stay that way until the next time his inner demon gave him its power. His only consolation, in that regard, was that his opponent couldn't use a Biju's power either. That left very few options. He could keep up the kenjutsu match until Yugura tired, trusting that his familial inherited stamina would allow him to outlast the Mizukage. He could start using his futon techniques. Or he could start resorting to fuinjutsu. He couldn't direct their fight to any of the territory surrounding them, lest they endanger more people, but both men could feel the eyes of ninja on either side watching them. It was slightly unnerving, but Naruto managed to block it out. It was just like the Chunin exams, and his first round bout against Neji that had ended with the Hyuga's hospitalization, soon followed by the invasion of Konoha. The only difference was that the stakes were higher, and he was fighting in foreign land. This was the battle that would decide the fate of Kurigakure. Ninjutsu? Yugura asked. Sure. Might as well do you the courtesy of outclassing you cleanly. Naruto grinned. Stowing their weapons on their backs, they both had reason to feel confident. Ninjutsu was the most chakra-intensive of the ninja arts, and a Jinchuriki's normal chakra was far more potent than a generic ninja's. It also meant that their control was much more unstable, as the Biju's chakra would bolster their host's reserves to staggering heights. Any techniques that the two began to throw were likely to have a large area of effect, and a sizable knockback as well. Both men wove through their hand seals, thought Naruto was a touch faster. Futon. Kumasora Fu. Suiten. Dongan Renden. Naruto took the first of the series of water bullets in his chest as it exploded, ruining his clothing once again. Yugura managed to avoid most of the wind attack that Naruto had sent after him, though a shallow cut that ran along his forearm was a sign that he'd at least managed to do something. Come on, how many times am I gonna have to buy a new shirt and jacket? This is ridiculous. Naruto stripped from the destroyed clothing, his scars revealed to the world once more. Layered muscles rippled underneath his skin, faded pink and off-white marks denoting most of the places he'd been struck. The most visual were the two holes in his chest, one directly over the right lung and one at his solar plexus. There was also the one around his left arm, a full ring that the Mizukage looked at with a puzzled expression. This is what happens when a village doesn't trust its Kage, Naruto said, preparing himself. Distrust breeds disloyalty. Disloyalty breeds dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction leads to suffering, though, in the end, I think they suffered more than I did. There's one thing I learned from the Kyuubi, only one, but it's the most important lesson of all. His gathering chakra metered out, and he made the hand signs for his jutsu. Sometimes, in life, you have to kill. Sometimes, that killing is a chore. Sometimes, it's just a part of the mission. Sometimes, you might even get to do it for fun. But the best kind of killing happens when you get to hear your victim beg and scream for mercy, and I don't care who you are, or what your rank is. You'll be begging for death by the time I'm done with you. Maybe, if all you do is continue talking. The Mizukage countered. Death would be a mercy, compared to that. Raiden. Futago Hubby. A large snake came from each of Naruto's hands before they burrowed underground, the aptly named twin snake technique beginning its work. Kaden. Gukyaku. The grand fireball was massive, nearly 4 times as tall as Yagura. Kin. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The massive summoning of clones left Naruto's chakra store vulnerable, but gave the Futago Hubby nearly unlimited cover to strike with. Sweden. Sway. The jutsu was interrupted, water coming out of the Mizukage's mouth as he gasped in pain when the first of the twin snakes struck. Immediately followed by the second of the pair, the technique finished. Rasengan. Naruto revved up his father's second signature technique, but when Yagura was struck, he melted into water. A Mizu Bunshin, behind cover of the Gukyaku. Correct. Yagura's voice came from behind him, and Naruto caught the kunai with the palm of his hand. Can't get away now, you slippery son of a bitch. The blonde grinned, and a new Rasengan went straight into Yagura's chest. Though the Mizukage flipped over backward, when he stood again, the wound was fully healed. Oh, son of a bitch. Alright, fine. Chakra chains exploded up from the earth, but Yagura managed to move around everyone, nearly managing to land a hit on Naruto before the Konoha nin could drop his control of the chains and dodge the blow. I liked you better when I was faster than you. Terribly sorry, but I like myself better like this. Sweden. Dynami. The great wave rose up from offshore, in the same place where the Aikibi had called forth its massive ball of sand, and Naruto winced. There was no way that wouldn't cause a huge amount of collateral. He couldn't see how thick it was, but from the height alone he could tell that it was an army-destroying technique. The Kage claimed, what was it? Something like, I am invincible as long as I have sand. Well, the same applies to me. As long as I have water, I cannot lose. Bullshit. Naruto charged headlong into the attack, Yagura at its base, intending to cause the technique to go off prematurely. His plan succeeded, the wave crashing down before it grew any larger, and sweeping up plenty of the metal tools that Naruto had dropped earlier in the fight. Naruto's second Dai Regania of the day shot through the ocean water without remorse, racking Yagura's body with pain. Soon enough, the water subsided, leaving both ninja winded and unprepared for the continuation of their fight. Futon. Kametachi. The wind scythe cut across their battlefield, buffeting Yagura into the cracked husk of a tree. Sweden. Isensenban. 1,000 water needles shot forward, and while Naruto managed to dodge most of them, he was struck by more than a few. The wounds healed over quickly, but Naruto still grunted from the exertion and the pain. Kaden. Hano no Kazui. The sand and grass all around them caught fire, a disproportionate inferno shooting up around them. Calling forth a single shadow clone, and activating the Kato Hikari no Jutsu, Naruto's clone ran forward when the flames went out. While the real Naruto was invisible, more clones came out from their various henge to attack, and when Yagura took a lethal blow, he dissolved into water once again. Something connected with the blonde's back, negating his invisibility technique and knocking him to the ground. His back against the fresh burned earth, he saw the real Yagura standing over him. That jutsu makes you invisible, but it doesn't change the way light bends around you. Using it in a fire-lit area was a careless mistake when your enemy is alert. Goddammit. Could have had you, too. Next time we meet, I'll remember not to use those diversionary Kaiden jutsu again. When I see you in the afterlife, I'll be sure to tell you the state of the world. Don't feel too bad. The life of shinobi is deception, and you were out-deceived. You've pushed me farther than anyone else before now, however. Take some measure of pride in that, with death. Yugura raised his staff to strike, with Naruto on his knees, and the blonde Jinchuriki closed his eyes. Sorry, Kakashi. Sorry, Sasuke. Sorry, Sakura. May the grave bring you the peace that no shinobi ever find in life. The Mizukage offered. Sorry, Tenten. Sorry, Gaara. Sorry, Ray-chan and Kuga-kun. Naruto tilted his head forward, cracking one eye open to look at Yugura before closing it again. Sorry, Hiruzen Jiji. Sorry, Tsunade Obaa-chan. Make it a clean cut, will you? Sorry, Otou-san, Okawa-san. Sorry, Oboro Obaa-chan. Sorry, Josuke Jiji. Of course. You deserve nothing but respect, and honor. I will give you a quick death. Sorry, Ero Sennin. He was almost out of chakra, absolutely without enough to cast a jutsu strong enough to overcome Yugura. If he had just killed Utakata, no, there was no point in thinking about, what if, situations now. It was over and done with. Yugura had won. Sorry, Tayuya. Goodbye, Uzumaki Naruto. He heard a scream, the sound of metal hitting flesh, and blood sprayed across his face, not his. Not his blood, not his body, not his voice. Sorry, piss brain. You're not going anywhere without me. His eyes snapped open, and he saw the hooked end of Yugura's staff deep into Yuya's ribcage. Tayuya, I was going to tell you, after the rebellion was over. I made up my mind. I wanted to be with you anyway, in spite of everything. I love you. She coughed, a new splash of blood hitting Naruto's face. Sorry I didn't have the guts to make up my mind before now. She slid off the staff, her back tearing open as the hook passed through it, and into Naruto's arms. As she fell, her lips brushed his, and for the first time in his life Naruto found that he didn't have anything to respond to her with. Even if he could have, there was no way she would have heard it. Her body was still warm, but Naruto had seen enough corpses to know. Something inside of him was broken. The monotonous dripping sound that Naruto had come to associate with his mind's inner workings, which took the form of a sewer system, had never felt so hollow. Walking without purpose, he wandered his way into the Kyuubi's chamber. The water beneath him had become blood red, the demons seething in rage, their mental states were connected, so the Biju processed all the emotions that Naruto's brain was too numb to handle at the moment. Drip, 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 dripping blood. Just like it was leaking from her chin. There's only one way to save her. It said, looking at him with vengeance in its eyes. How? There was no hope in his eyes, only fear. Only pain. You have to use my power. You have to undo the seal, but there are consequences. I don't care. There was a sudden edge to Naruto's voice. He didn't care if it was a trick, and he didn't care about the consequences. He would do anything. Remove the seal, and you can save her. Remove the seal, and you damn yourself to my corruption. Every time you use my power, you will lose part of yourself to me, until all that remains is an empty vessel for my rage and hatred, unless you somehow become able to make me submit to you. Not that it'll happen in your lifetime. And on the day that Naruto failed to do that, it would have a human body and be able to eat ramen in the flesh. Finally, Kurama could have both freedom and ramen. That day would be the most glorious one of its life. For her, anything. She had told him she loved him. Mei's words came back to his mind. Regrets, like death, are something that plague every ninja throughout their life. If she dies tomorrow, I know you'll regret not having loved her in the time you had her. The soon-to-be Mizukage was right. He regretted not having lived with his feelings more open, regretted not trusting Tayuya enough to believe that she wouldn't end up hurting him. He regretted that he'd given up so easily, and accepted death, even as he knew she was watching, and most of all, he regretted that she had chosen to die in his place. Unbidden, the world around him changed. Two trails lay before the boy. The first, on his left, was illuminated by the dying firelight. It led to Konoha, home. It led to warmth, and love, and family. It led to friendship, kindness, and the welcome of a heroic man who had come to gain and lose so much. It led to power, unity, and peace. Tayuya was not by his side. Unlike his first choice, the path on his right was one in darkness that led to the seal placed over the Kyuubi's cage. It led to cold, the dark, the unknown. It led to the road of death, that he might become the grim successor to his father's title, Bishonen Shinigami. It led to places Naruto could not see, did not know, did not want to know. It led to violence and terror, to hatred and pain. It led to fear, it led to suffering, it led to sacrifice. The boy didn't know who asked, barely aware that it was happening at all, but when it spoke, he listened. Two roads lay before you, it said to him, just as it had been told many years ago, and you must choose one. The monster on the edge of his senses was formless, shapeless, yet contained. What he failed to realize was that it was only a mirror. Do you choose the path of light, the path you know, the path of protection? Or will you follow me into shadow, no matter where I may lead? Before that voice had spoken, he never would have known his answer, but as soon as its questions ended, he understood the answer he had known all along. For her, the beast and he were one, and he hungered. Naruto's hands went to the padlock of the cage. He never even saw the seal hit the ground. Zenten. Kensetsu. As Naruto vanished from his mindscape, the last chakra-based vestiges of his parents reappeared to reattach the seal. You wouldn't dare waste the final remains of your chakra, and give up the chance to see your son. Pathetic. Besides, I've already cast the technique. A third, unseen person's hand moved forward, putting the paper marker back in place, vanishing forever from the mindscape of the young ninja. This world wasn't finished with Uzumaki Naruto yet. As Naruto moved back into the world of the living, he saw what the Kyuubi had meant when it had cast a jutsu named Construct. 4 of Naruto's own chakra chains held Yagura spread-eagled in the air, and the falcons on his back came forward before increasing in size. The chains drained Yagura's chakra and kept him perfectly immobilized, unable to cast any jutsu. Your death will give her life. Naruto intoned, blood shining on his face in the early dusk. Your death will give this land life. The fire had been taken out of him. This was not Naruto. One for the village you served, the village you failed. Jakirigakure no Sato. He swung, and Yagura's left arm was gone before he could register it. 2 for the people you murdered, the people you betrayed. The innocent lives lost in your madness. The right leg was cut off next, Yagura's body beginning to tear in half from the strain. 3 for the land you broke, the land that trusted you, the land you call your home. A chain wrapped around the Mizukage's middle, holding him still as his right arm was cut off. 4 for myself. I, the one who fought you. I, the one who should have died. I, the one who will kill you. With a cry of pain, Yagura lost his final limb, leaving nothing but a torso and head. It was over, and the whole world knew it. Tayuya's death in his place had broken Naruto enough that he would kill his enemy mercilessly. Looking at the scene before them, they knew Kirigakure's future, the rebels had won. And 5, for her. To her, I owe my life. To her, I owe everything. To her, who I'll be joining soon. Yagura stared at Naruto the entire time, and the blonde kept eye contact without flinching. He had no conscience in this moment, the Mizukage's death would never haunt his dreams. For her, the only one I love. The blade swung true, and Yagura's severed head tumbled to the ground. His eyes still open as the light began to leave them, and a calm expression on his face. This was the fate of all ninja, in the end. Death was their reward, the final gift in their life of killing was to be killed. Naruto opened his mouth to scream, but a demonic roar came out instead. As night continued to fall, the last of the light vanishing over the horizon, rain began to pour down. Naruto stood outside the small room, surrounded by more supporters than he knew what to do with. He was staring at the door with a blank expression on his face. Even though he wasn't listening, he heard Mei speak. Trust in Jiraiya. He knows what he's doing. The red-headed woman said quietly, her hand on his shoulder as she spoke. It shouldn't have come to that. If I'd just killed Utakata, instead of sealing him away, then I would have had almost twice as much chakra to work with. I still would have won, and Tayuya wouldn't have. His eyes didn't leave the door. Just for the record, I very much appreciate that I'm not dead. The aforementioned Rokubi Jinchuriki said, sitting on a bench nearby. Just thought I should mention that. Listen, Gaki. What's done is done. That white-haired pervert is one crazy son of a bitch, but there's nobody in the world who's as good at fuinjutsu as he is. Zabuza said, his gaze shifting between the blonde boy and the door that held his interest. The Kyuubi's words haunted him. You will lose part of yourself to me, will you follow me into shadow, no matter where I may lead? He had agreed, he had made the deal. His chosen fate awaited, but that didn't matter to him. All that mattered was that there was a chance Jiraiya could save Tayuya from her death. Conveniently, it also solved the problem of Yagura's butchering at Naruto's hands. It was a known, though incredibly risky, way to bring back those who had been clinically dead for a very short amount of time. They were going to make Tayuya into the new Sanbi Jinchuriki. After killing Yagura, Naruto had used the Enma no Niju Roku Kanajuchi on Tayuya, the seal preventing her body from moving any more toward death. She would remain that way until he finally unsealed her, at which point they would know for sure whether or not he'd succeeded in sealing her early enough. Thankfully, since she was dead, the chakra cost had been minimal and he'd been able to draw from his own reserves rather than the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto, that girl was one of Orochimaru's guards, and she's trained with you and Jiraiya for a long time. Temari said. She'll be okay. She's worked alongside a Jinchuriki. She'll make a good one. Yugito offered, having been awoken from her comatose state. For all his dense cluelessness, Naruto had a knack for surrounding himself with women, all of them older than he was. Temari had turned 16 earlier in the year, while Yugito was 27 and Mei was 29. As someone who'd gotten used to being the oldest in a group, during his 2 years of being held back in the academy, it was a mildly rankling thought that he was now the youngest one present. Well, no, that wasn't true. Kankuro, Gaara, and Haku were all younger than he was. Small comfort. Jiraiya was working in that room with a seal master from Kiri, and Kankuro as well. The Suna puppeteer's rough knowledge of basic fuinjutsu would take some of the strain away from the other two, who would be doing most of the work, and reduce the chance of lethal consequences for any of the other people in the room. It went in spoken that he would be risking his own life for the seal as well. The door opened, and the three came out. Jiraiya looked to his blonde student before closing his eyes and exhaling. There's nothing else that we can do for her, it's all on you, kid. Shut the door behind yourself. If Tayuya's biju-filled corpse went berserk, or began to erupt from the unstable chakra, then the dead man's switch he'd sealed into the walls would take care of it, though it was probably best not to let Naruto think those options were possible. Good luck, Naruto-koi. Mei added her own suffix of endearment for him, squeezing his shoulder as he began to move away. Walking, he thought back to his words before Yagura's death. To her, who I'll be joining soon. It was meant as a declaration of suicide, that he would follow her into death, but this was a better alternative. This way, they could live together again. Fuinjutsu script was scrawled throughout the room, and as Naruto began to charge his chakra, it raced and condensed around her stomach in her cursed seal. He wove through the hand signs slowly, making absolutely certain that his slightly shaking hands didn't falter in their work. Dog, tiger, rat, horse, dog, rabbit, dragon, rabbit, tiger, monkey, boar, ox, dragon, ox, dog, rat, horse, boar, kai. He released the 26 hammers of Enma, and watched as nothing happened. No great gasping breath, no lurch to one side or the other, no consciousness. Then, he saw the skin around her ribcage begin to heal. Crushed bones mending back into place, lung reinflating, the thin layer of fat and muscle recovering itself. Naruto, we won. He sat down next to her, holding her head in his lap. Thanks to you, we won. I'm glad, told you, felt. Though she wasn't saying all the words, he understood. Me too. I love you, Tayuya. Love you, shithead. Nap time now. She slumped back, unconscious in Naruto's arms, but he could still feel her pulse. She'd made it. They'd done it. He could deal with the fallout of his actions, and their political ramifications, later. All that mattered was that she was alive, he'd saved her. She would stay with him, in this life, forever. Nobody had ever heard of a Jinchuriki dying of old age, after all. Picking her up, he carried her out, and looked down to the base of her neck before he opened the door to bring her out to the waiting world. The curse mark Orochimaru had placed on her, however long ago it had been, was completely erased. In its place was a tattoo-like symbol mirrored on the Uzushio headband that Naruto wore, the Uzumaki crest that he would always carry with him. With that, he slid open the door. "Oh, head," Tayuya said, shaking off her grogginess and starting to wake up. The last thing she remembered was falling asleep in Naruto's arms. And before that, pain. Her body had practically moved on its own, not that she would have been unwilling to step in the way of that blow. Hand moving up to her ribcage, she felt complete skin there, not even a scar. Had it all been a dream? Tayuya looked around. She was laying in a hospital bed, dozens of get-well cards and letters standing on the table next to her, and there was a heavy weight across the top of her legs. "Hey, Naruto, wake up. I don't care how much you wanna be on top of me right now, but this definitely isn't the time or place." He snored, nuzzling deeper and mumbling something into one of her legs. "Wake up, goddammit. I don't have all day, piss brain." Still nothing. If anything, he seemed to only shift deeper, trying to dive beneath the loose clothing she wore. "Don't you dare. I swear to God if you start trying to eat me out in your sleep I'm gonna cut out your tongue." No response. Normally, the irritation would have caused her cursed seal to begin acting up, but Orochimaru's mark did nothing. Her hand went to its placement, juxtaposed between her throat and collarbone, and she couldn't feel the cruel chakra that emanated from it at all times. Was it gone? NNN. Tayuya-chan. Naruto muttered in his sleep. "Happy. Wake thee up." Tayuya bucked her legs, Naruto's upper body flying off of them and sending his chair over backwards, causing him to crash into the ground. "Oops. Hope you know I'm not sorry." Huh. Naruto bolted up, and Tayuya didn't think she'd ever seen Naruto give a smile that happy in all their time together. "You're awake." He grabbed a hold of her, lifting her up and pulling her into a hug. "We did it. We made it. Oh, man, that was, wow. We were all really worried about you, Tayuya-chan." "Okay. Piss brain, what the hell do you mean, we made it?" "Well, after you got hit, and I killed Yagura, the only way we could keep you alive was to, To what? What did you do?" "I just put the seal on you that kept you from completely dying. Jiraiya is the one who did most of the Fuinjutsu legwork." "What did you do?" "We may have, made you the new Sanbi Jinchuriki. We weren't sure it'd work. A Biju sealing when the target is already grown is a very risky thing to attempt, but apparently, something to do with being a teenager makes it easier. Probably all the other bullshit that comes with adolescence." Wait a minute here. You put the Sanbi inside of me. I'm a Jinchuriki now. Are you shitting me?" "Yeah, kinda. Little bit. Please don't kill me." Tayuya sighed. This was going to take a lot of getting used to. The festival was in its second day, and would continue through the end of the week. It had begun with Mei's official coronation as the Godime Mizukage, and Kurigakure celebrated a final end to its bloody rebellion. Not the least of those who were honored were Naruto and Tayuya, granted diplomatic immunity for their service to the war effort. Still, Naruto had grown up with the elderly Sandaime practically raising him. He knew politics would never be so black and white an issue. While he'd fought for the winning side, they'd been no more than a powerful, vocal minority whose words didn't speak for the whole of Kiri. Mei's word was law, but if Naruto ever came across a Kiri nin in the field then he doubted they would be so benevolent. He'd murdered their previous leader in cold blood, brutally hacking off his limbs before decapitating him with the onyx blade currently on his back, and had done it in plain view of almost every ninja Kiri possessed. Trusting in the goodness of people had never done him much good, he mused, thinking to the scars etched into his body. That was a flaw for a supposed Hokage hopeful in training, not that the issue would have mattered to him. Naruto had a knack for avoiding his detractors' statements, even if the one antagonizing him was himself. Something about ignorance and bliss, as the saying went. Naruto wasn't stupid, but he was still hot-headed and tended not to think through all the actions he committed to. The most obvious was his use of Kaden Jutsu against Yagura, burning up his chakra reserves, but he had a history for those sorts of decisions, and he vowed that he would never do something that could end up endangering Tayuya ever again. He thought back to the former Mizukage's death at his hands, how he'd used the Kyuubi's power before it had suddenly cut itself off, but what he'd been given had been just enough. The cost of using it, in his chakra-exhausted state, had been relatively minor. His ears had tilted back and lengthened their canals, lengthening a quarter of an inch and tapering into a soft point. The keratin in his nails had hardened, turning them into natural claws. While the changes were visible, and moderately noticeable, he didn't mind. Anything was preferable to allowing Tayuya to die. I meant what I said. Tayuya told him as they walked together. Hand in hand, they moved down the street and enjoyed the kind smiles that went their way. Even though Tayuya knew that most of those smiles were for Naruto, as the hero who took down the tyrannical Yagura, she knew that some of them came from people who had seen her move to intercept the blow that would have killed him. The blow that did kill her. That was something she was still struggling to wrap her head around. She, for a few minutes, had actually been dead. She had died, and been resurrected with the only way known to the shinobi world. They'd taken the Biju from Yagura's corpse and sealed it inside of her. In the process, it had destroyed her cursed seal, possibly because Orochimaru's intention was to simulate the power a Biju gave to its Jinchuriki. She wouldn't complain about that. The seal had made her feel dirty, used, and even though she knew that she was well out of range, it had always been nagging at the back of her mind that maybe, just maybe, he could take control of her body and force her to kill Naruto. She didn't have to worry about that ever again. She could deal with the real fallout of having become a Jinchuriki later, once they were back in Uzushio. The real process of it had escaped her understanding, but the general explanation was that a Biju's chakra adapted to the human it was sealed in nearly instantly, healing them and pumping chakra through their system to force the heart and other vital organs to being working again. While it didn't always work, sometimes causing the new Jinchuriki to go berserk or simply remain dead, Jiraiya's sealing prowess had allowed him to succeed in the endeavor. That was twice, now, that he'd saved her life. Grateful as she was for that, she couldn't help her irritation at that. She was supposed to be strong enough that she didn't need to be saved, but, then again, so was Naruto, and she had watched their fight. If Kurabi hadn't been there, then Yagura would have died very quickly. Naruto had dominated the beginning of their fight, the 2-on-1 odds not affecting him nearly as poorly as it should have. Sealing Utakata, he consistently claimed, had drained half of his chakra for just one technique. Then, after the former Mizukage had released his Biju and Gaara had gone into full possession mode, Naruto had done something. It had to have been the Kyuubi's chakra, and the sheer amount it took must have taken a severe toll on his body. After that, Yagura's return to his full mental and physical abilities, fully healed, put Naruto at a disadvantage that he couldn't totally overcome. Naruto liked to stealth kill, despite his ninjutsu capabilities, and moving away from the open field where they'd fought would have put innocents at risk. So Naruto had been outpowered and worn down, leaving nobody surprised that he hadn't managed to keep up a sustained fight against 3 separate Jinchuriki, and when the time came for the killing blow, not even Jiraiya had stepped in. Tayuya understood, now, what people meant when they said that some things were worse than death. She was the only one who had been so unafraid of the Reaper that she had moved to intercept the attack that would have killed Naruto. The realization in that moment was that her love for him had been stronger than her fear of dying. Her fear of losing him had been more powerful than her will to live. She had a discolored patch of skin on her ribcage where the staff had torn through her, healed over by the Sanbi's chakra but left as a scar. It would be a permanent reminder of just how far she was willing to go to defend him. Knowing Naruto, it would probably serve as nothing but a reminder that he hadn't been strong enough to win on his own. Those thoughts were for another time, though. For now, they had a festival to enjoy, and people to greet, and training to resume. They deserved their happiness, Mei said, looking down at the pair from her office in the Mizukage Tower. And you do not, Gaara said, standing beside her. The pair had been working out a diplomatic agreement, with trade rights and a non-aggression pact among other details. I didn't say that, no, But you implied. The case cage would have laughed, but chose not to. I'm surprised. I would have thought a highly supported candidate who has now become Mizukage would have had many suitors, but even your guards don't seem to stick around long. When I was young, Kurigakure had a tradition where the members of each graduating class were paired, and each pair was pitted in a fight to the death. My partner and I confessed our love for one another, and I killed him in one blow. Ever since then, nobody has wanted to be near me. The Aikibi was planted inside of me while my mother was still pregnant with me, and she died in childbirth as a result. At the age of 4, my father sent my uncle to assassinate me. After that night, I was convinced that the only way to survive in this world was to fight only for myself. To love only myself. I terrorized my siblings in my village for 10 years until the invasion of Konoha, where Naruto beat me entirely on his own, and, how do you say it, forced his will upon me. After that fight, I saw that I was wrong, and I began to make amends. I see no reason why your personal life can't be the same. But instead of becoming a cage, the end result would be finding love. Genuine love, like those two have. May let out a long, dreamy sigh, seeming to deflate as her face settled into a pout. I'm happy for them, but I can't help feeling a little jealous. Even you, Cage Dono, must have someone. Don't you? Please, just Gaara is fine. That's how all of my village knew me before I was their leader, and that's how all of them know me now. My position in the village doesn't reflect how people should act around me. While she disagreed with him, she wouldn't argue. All right then, Gaara. Still, my point stands. Surely you, too, have someone special in your life. Just women interested in the power of being my wife, or girls with the equivalent to a schoolyard crush. Nothing serious, and none worth pursuing seriously in turn. Not even a tall, buxom redhead who just won a war thanks to your best friend down there. Both turned their heads to look at the other, no longer staring out the window. Getting to know you, personally, would take precedence before I could make that decision. The age gap doesn't bother you. Shinobi carve out a life in the midst of death all around them, and there's no telling how or when that life might end. It's better to accept what can be given or taken, rather than spending your life wishing that something else had come out differently. Still, if you'd like, I'd be more than willing to accompany you through the festival. Outside the door, Ao and Zabuza looked to one another and nodded before vanishing. While eavesdropping was always frowned upon in polite company, they would always be on high alert whenever their cage was involved. The Kurigakure no Oni grinned beneath his armor-tape mask. It was just like he'd told Tayuya. Sure, being together and not having worked through your problems could come back to bite you in the long run, but you don't have to fly solo, either. Nobody will tell you two that you can't help each other out of your own little private hells. You might even find that it brings you a lot closer to take your burdens and share them. It looked like the new Sanbi Jinchuriki wasn't the only redhead who'd end up taking that advice. Jiraiya was silent, having secluded himself even as the festival surrounded him on all sides. He'd been useless. In a time when Naruto had needed him the most, Tayuya had jumped forward, but it shouldn't have come to that. He'd been frozen, he hadn't moved to attack Yagura from behind. He hadn't summoned any of his toads, hadn't entered into sage mode, hadn't done anything. He'd been worthless, no matter how much nobody wanted to let him forget his work in keeping Tayuya alive. The scene had been terrifying, a practical scenario repetition of the Kyuubi attack nearly 16 years ago. In his mind, they might as well have been one and the same, two of his students, dying in order to eliminate the threat that opposed them both. Naruto, the spitting image of his legendary father, and Tayuya, who could pass for a young Kushina any time she wanted to. The flashbacks they gave him any time they were near one another, whether they were arguing about the mundane or laughing with each other about some joke or circumstance, they were beyond painful, the ache in his chest a relentless desire to go back to older days. Better days. Days where he had acted when Tsunade and Orochimaru had been in grave danger. Days where he had been able to talk and laugh and enjoy time with his students, Shizune included. While he'd hated her uncle, he bore no ill will against the girl herself, and had always treated her just as unbiased as he did with Kushina or Minato. While the future Hokage had been his favorite student, and his true successor, he hadn't taught the girls any less than Minato. Perhaps, if he'd truly equalized his time with them, then two of the three would still be walking and Naruto would still have his parents. Whenever his loved ones were on the line, he could never do anything. That was why he maintained such a distance from Konoha at almost all times. If they were going to die whether or not he was there, then there was no point in trying to save them. That was a painful lesson he'd had to learn during the Second Great War, when his parents died beside him and he'd been unable to prevent it. His mother had shielded him, her last act giving Jiraiya enough time to use the most powerful technique he'd ever created, the Kaden, Jigoku Arashi. It had eliminated a full half-mile of terrain, burnt countless enemies to cinders, and left Jiraiya alone to mourn his parents' corpses. He'd never used the jutsu again. Unbidden, a knock came from outside his room's door. Come in, it's unlocked. Geez, Ero Sennin, I would have thought you'd be happy as hell with all the booze they've got flowing around here. Really? Lighten up. Naruto entered the room. How can you say that? You almost. Not another word, you sleazy pervert. Yeah, it happened. I decided to move on, and get stronger, so that it never happens again. Tayuya-chan has, too. Doesn't make any sense for you to get all morose on us now. Jackass. Fine. Who knows, I might even enjoy myself. Naruto was right. There was no point in worrying about the past, and how badly it could have gone. His job was to teach Naruto everything he could, so that when it came time for the Akatsuki to begin moving once again, the blonde would be able to handle himself without worrying about how strong he was. After all, Yagura might have been a monstrosity, but Jiraiya's informant in the Akatsuki had told him exactly who was in that group besides Uchiha Itachi, Hoshigaki Kisame, and that Orochimaru had been a former member. The last time he had seen it rain as hard as it did when Yagura died, he'd heard that Yahiko's rebellion against Hitokage no Hanzo, leader of Omegakure, had been decimated almost entirely. Its remnants had become the Akatsuki, though Jiraiya hadn't learned about that until many years later, and the name of Hanzo was one that brought fear into any ninja that lived during the Second and Third Wars. The Salamander summoning ninja was touted as one of the strongest shinobi in history, alongside legendary names like Uchiha Madara, the Shadaime Kazekage, and Namikaze Minato. It had taken an entire army to fight the man to a standstill, and the only four who walked away from that battle were the newly christened Sannin and Hanzo himself, but at some point within the last 5 years, he'd been assassinated, with every relative of his family hunted down and killed regardless of their age. That had been the work of Pain, leader of the Akatsuki and wielder of the Rinnegan. Nagato. A name that hadn't left the aging man's lips in a long time. A name whose owner had fought for peace, and justice, and kindness to the world. A name that no longer existed, lost to the annals of history, and that had been replaced by the agony in his heart. On the day Nagato had died, Pain had been born, and he had determined for himself that the world should be scarred with his name. Shelving those thoughts for the moment, however, Jiraiya decided to relax a little bit. The life of a ninja couldn't be all missions and chakra exhaustion and constant training. You had to enjoy life, too, or else it couldn't really be called living. The festival had come and gone. Today, October 10th, was Naruto's birthday, a perfect time to say goodbye, and to end their celebration on a high note. It was finally time to return to Uzushio, though nobody would ever have said that the rebellion's heroes would ever overstay their welcome. After a slew of goodbyes, and a long list of thanks from all the ninja who'd fought for the rebels that had included a few jutsu scrolls for Naruto and Tayuya to learn, it was finally time to go. We'll miss you, Gaki. Zabuza said. Come back and visit sometime, You did promise me a kenjutsu match, so you're not allowed to die until I can beat you into the ground. You either. He looked to Tayuya, you gotta keep his dumb in line and make sure he doesn't do anything like, yeah. Zabuza-sama, are you getting sentimental? This isn't like you. Haku teased. Shut up. 10,000 apologies, Zabuza-sama. Truly, I tell you, my sorrow knows no bounds. Everyone in attendance knew that it would happen again. And again. If Haku ever ran out of numbers, he could just start again from the bottom. Jiraiya had summoned Gamatotsu earlier, and given the small toad an inverted summoning seal to place on the ground in Uzushio. He possessed the matching seal, and they waited. Gaara and his siblings stood with the Kiri ninja, a composed smile on the Cage's face which left little doubt about how he felt. He stood beside Mei, much closer than the older woman had deemed proper when she spoke with Naruto, and it didn't take long for the blonde to figure out what was going on between them. Grinning, he was about to open his mouth before Kurabi spoke. We'll be heading back to Kumo. Miss 3, Mr. 9, come and see us soon though. Kurabi, by God, shut the hell up. That's mean, Yugi-chan. Don't be dissin' on my rappin' plan. If you don't stop right now I'll tell your brother about the time that you tried to. Okay, the burly man said. Anyway, he's right, you too. I'm pretty upset that I didn't get to take you out for a test drive. The blonde woman smirked. When one or more of us is in an area, it's pretty self-explanatory that we'd want to see who's stronger, and help each other become even more powerful. Yeah, I'm definitely going to need a lot of help learning how to do this. Our bond transcends nations, Utakata added, his old bubble-blowing pipe having been replaced by the new one in his hand. We are all one another's brothers and sisters, and while we may fight, we're still family. So whenever you're done doing whatever it is you're up to, come pay us a visit. I'll be looking forward to it. Yugito finished. I'll be working on training my speed. 9. Yo daddy was the fastest, but you might be the next in line. True to his word, Kurabi had kept the scar that Naruto had cut across his face, the left side of his beard now with a line through it that would never grow back. Kurabi had called it a reminder never to underestimate his fellow Jinchuriki again, no matter the supposed difference in their power levels. Naruto appreciated that. He hated being taken lightly. See you all later, Naruto said. I don't know when we'll be back, but. There it went. The drastic change in scenery was apparent, and while the lurching feeling of being summoned went away after a few moments, it still left Naruto's head spinning. Naruto Oni. Tayuya Oni. Jiraiya Ero-san. My reputation is ruined. The white-haired Sannin cried out as Naruto scooped up his pseudo-siblings. You two have gotten bigger, huh? Yeah, now we look like we could be 10 years old, huh? Rei said, a big smile on her face as Naruto hoisted both herself and her little brother onto his shoulders. Well, you sure feel like it. Naruto joked, followed by Tayuya playfully swatting the back of his head. Don't be an piss brain. Months ago, he'd taken that to be an insult. Now, it almost seemed like a term of endearment to him. The Hittite looks good on you. Oboro walked forward, cupping her grandson's face with her right hand. You've grown into a strong man. Josuke would have been proud to call you his grandson. There was no way to measure how heavily that praise weighed on Naruto's mind. It meant more than the world to him, to hear something like that. Thanks, Obaa-chan. So, tell me, how did it go? What did you do? I want to know everything. Should I be expecting great-grandchildren soon? No. Both teens yelled at once, the twins leaping away as Oboro and Jiraiya began to laugh. Don't worry, Oboro Obaa-chan, we'll tell you everything, but you may not like it. The Uzumaki woman steeled herself. If the optimistic Naruto, of all people, was telling her that it would be hard to hear, she wouldn't enjoy it. As the tale of their time in Kurigakure continued onward, she knew she was right. It wasn't Naruto's fault. He'd effectively fought 4 different opponents, as Yagura had possessed different ability levels before and after the Sanbi's emergence. Still, after seeing the scar over Tayuya's ribcage and watching Jiraiya's Shichidaime Gamma Senin no Fuin appear on her belly when she channeled her chakra, it was a hard pill to swallow. Jiraiya's mastery in Fuinjutsu outclassed even her own, and the seal of the 7th great Toad Sage was pure artistry. Her granddaughter-in-law, however presumptive that title might be, had died and been brought back to life. She had died to save Naruto. Naruto had nearly died trying to save her. The feelings that they held for one another had, very nearly, cost the pair their lives. In a minute or two, she would recover, but the knowledge that she had very nearly lost her last directly related kinsman was a hard blow. And then we came back. Naruto said. So that's everything. Training would resume in the next couple days. While the trio had been relaxing throughout the festival, they would want a couple days to wind down from being in foreign territory and a former live combat zone. Well, ignoring everything else, happy birthday, Naruto Mago. Training could definitely wait. 3 more months had come and gone, and time had passed for a year since Naruto and Tayuya had left with Jiraiya on their training trip in Uzushiogakure. I think we should go, Naruto said, speaking of Kurabi and Yugito's offer to visit Kumogakure for an extended period of time. Nobody is better to teach a Jinchuriki than another Jinchuriki. And I think we should stay. Jiraiya argued. Kumo is the most aggressive nation in existence. They tried to kidnap your mother, and that was the day your father became known as the Kuroi Senko. They instigated the Third Great War, and almost started another one shortly after the Kyuubi attack when they tried to kidnap the Hyuga clan's heiress. Grass is green, water is wet, and Kumo is not a nation to be trusted. That sort of point-blank, black and white operation mentality had never sat well with Naruto. He refused to believe that anything he heard from just one person could be right, unless they had the full authority on the subject at hand. And, as far as morality went, Jiraiya was far from an expert. Naruto still remembered the instant trifecta he'd come across while they were searching for Tsunade to come back to Konoha. Jiraiya, with a cup of sake in one hand and a bottle in the other, with a woman on each arm and an empty wallet that had formerly held Naruto's rent money. That had been fun to explain to the brothel's owner, who had let it slide prior to insistence that he pay double the next month. Well, then I'm going anyway. You can stay and train the twins with Oboro Obaa-chan. Oh, so I'm chopped liver now, huh? Tayuya said indignantly, side-eyeing her boyfriend with more than a little bit of irritation. No, I just kind of assumed that you would be coming with me. Am I wrong? Well, no. Wherever he went, she would follow. The fact held true in reverse. If pressed, they could always just say they were still following Tsunade's orders. I can't just have you go AWOL, Naruto. Do you realize the kind of disaster that could be if Tsunade ever finds out? I already pushed my limits with her before we left last year. She'd have my on a silver platter and my head mounted on her wall. And you'd probably thank her for it. Naruto mocked his teacher. Goddammit, Naruto, I'm not going to let something happen to you. The only way I can manage that is to keep you hidden away here, where no enemy ninja would ever think to come looking for you. Jiraiya threw his hands up in exasperation and rage. So I just sit here and rot, training myself. I understand the need to be strong, but I can't advance if you and Oboro Obaa-chan are the only ones teaching me anything. Besides, it's not like there's much you can do in the way of teaching me how to control the Kyuubi's chakra, or Tayuya with the Sanbi. Yugito-chan and Kurabi. They can. Kumo's famous for their kenjutsu abilities, too, so I could definitely improve by training with them. Naruto, please, Jiraiya began before being interrupted. No. There's a line between protecting me so that I can train in peace, and keeping me holed up in a place where I can't get a sense of how the world operates outside of Konoha's walls. Sometimes, you have to protect people, and sometimes you have to let them decide whether they think they're strong enough to protect themselves. I killed a cage, goddammit. I think that speaks to my ability to protect myself. He had a point, even if that kill had only happened under dubious circumstances that would hopefully never repeat themselves. I'm gonna go on my own training trip, and it's gonna be a million times better than this one. A training trip extravaganza, with blackjack and hookers. Naruto, think about that last word for a second. Hey, I never said they'd be for me. Besides, isn't your birthday in like 2 days? I'm sure we could make it to Yugakure in time to celebrate. I hadn't thought about that. You're right, we could. The two were making a show of not caring about what their teacher was telling them. Pay attention, for God's sake. Jiraiya yelled. No, I think they should go. Oboro said, walking toward the trio. It was late at night, the twins were fast asleep, and she had heard them from a decent distance away. Nobody ever learns to have a balanced view of the world by remaining in one or two places all their life. You owe it to them to not keep them limited to the things we can teach. Besides, if all 6 of us go, then there's a little less risk. Safety in numbers, after all. And the twins, you saw what they could do, that day when they came out of the labyrinth. They could easily match any Chunin, and many Junin. They're only 9 years old, but their age has nothing to do with their talent. They were raised in a time when all the world was an active war zone, and they could be required to kill at any point in their lives. They will be able to defend themselves. Jiraiya had to admit that was true. You know what? Fine. But the second this starts to go south, don't any of you dare come to me and say that I was right. Wouldn't dream of it, Arrow Sennin. Naruto grinned cheekily, keeping the anger from making its way to his face. Come hell or high water, he would learn to control his inner demon. You did what? The Yondaime Raikage, was in his office. Kurabi and Yugito were giving him a mission report. I told them they could come any time, and listen to Kurabi's rhyme. So you're saying that you extended an open invitation to a foreign village's Jinchuriki to come inside Kumo. Well, you sound mad, that makes me sad. Even so, bro, it'll be a while before they show. Couple months, maybe I dunno. They also wouldn't actually have to come inside Kumogakure proper, until you're satisfied in knowing that they aren't a threat. Kurabi has the Unraikyo Valley, remember? Yugito spoke up. No, I would rather they just remain under loose Anbu surveillance. You said Jiraiya was with them. Yes, Yugito said. While we were there, he told us about an organization that's hunting Jinchuriki, the Akatsuki. That name sounded familiar, for some reason, but he couldn't figure out why. On the other hand, Kurabi and Yugito's presence after the war ended had allowed for Kumo to attain a new alliance together with Kiri. The new Mizukage had been gracious, despite the fact that his soldiers had fought for the opposing side. He appreciated that. How long will it take to get to Kumo? 2 days, less than 1, if we really push ourselves. Are you all ready? Jiraiya asked. Yeah, let's go. The sun hadn't risen yet, though the darkness had begun to wane into dawn. Alright then. Top speed. The mad dash out of Uzushio began, though no lightning struck near the as they left. They reached the beaches of Hai no Kuni, and continued moving north by way of the trees. The coast was beautiful, stretching as far as any of them could see, with not another soul left in the world to walk along it. It would be the perfect place to go if you wanted to be alone with your thoughts. Around midday, they passed into Yu no Kuni, home of the disbanded Yugakure no Sato after its ninja reached the consensus that they would rather enjoy lives of peace than always continue preparing for greater wars to come. From there, Jiraiya commandeered a small sloop, placing a homing seal on the dock's underside and explaining to the merchant what would happen. Then, as the 5 Sweden users of their group shaped the water around them, they took off at speeds that made Zabuza's boat feel like a snail. In the late afternoon, they reached the beaches of Kaminari no Kuni, and had bypassed Shimo no Kuni entirely. From there, it was a 3-hour run to the gates of Kumogakure no Sato, and they were greeted by none other than Yugito and Kurabi themselves. Nice of you to show up. Yugito said. My bro will want to speak to ya, swear to God he's like our mother. Time to get a move on though. 9 and 3, come watch the show. He means he wants to take you around the village, but that will have to wait until we actually talk with Isama. There's more of you than I had been told. E looked to Kurabi for an explanation. There were only 3 of 'em in Kiri, my eyes didn't deceive me. Does he always do that? Yes. 5 voices spoke in unison, answering Obero's question. Regardless, I was told several months ago that we should expect you to arrive. Congratulations for your work in Kiri, by the way. Yugito and my brother may have been on the side opposing you, but I can appreciate talent where it's present, even in those who aren't strictly my allies. Kumo and Konoha had always been uneasy with one another, a fact that he had been trying to change for some time now. Since the Sandaime Raikage's death, he'd worked to bring better, less aggressive relations with all the other nations. He hadn't always succeeded, but he blamed that on the Yondaime Kazekage's unwillingness to trust anyone not born in Suna, and, apparently, the Yondaime Mizukage's mind being controlled. He would always be alert, because they were living in dangerous times, but it was foolish not to make alliances. This was a chance to create a stronger bond with Konoha. While he didn't enjoy the safety risks associated with playing host to a pair of Jinchuriki, it would reflect badly on them to refuse such a prominent Konoha ninja as Jiraiya. Moreover, this was a chance to show the Konoha nin that he did things differently than his predecessors. He was passionate, even bull-headed at times, but he would never stoop to the lows that they had. Thanks. No, I mean it. I respect anyone willing to push their limits for the cause they believe in, whether or not they find victory. True strength comes from passion, and the will to follow through. Be that as it may, Isama, they'll need a room. Multiple rooms. 2, 3, 3. Jiraiya, Naruto, Tayuya and Oboro all said at once. Did you have a particular place in mind? E asked. You've been here several times, Jiraiya Dono. I'm sure you have an idea of which establishments you'd prefer. Truth be told, Jiraiya would rather sleep on a rock. While the younger generations who'd come after him had their grudge against Iwa, and the Sannin would never claim that the animosity didn't have its place, he had seen Kumo shinobi commit horrendous atrocities in the name of war. He had fought them as they raided a farm village which was just trying to survive, he had watched them leave no survivors. While not the main perpetrator, they had sacked Uzushio. The real difficulty Jiraiya had with them was one that he had carried for years, and he doubted that he'd ever be able to let it go. It was Kumo ninja who'd killed his parents. Naruto had been partially correct in his statement about how most people wouldn't care that he was the son of the Yondaime Hokage due to the fact that wartime events happened during their wars, and carrying them forward would be foolish. But Naruto also hadn't watched his loved ones die in droves on the battlefield, and known who was responsible, and been tied up by politics to never engage them unless another war broke out or their missions were conflicting. War left scars that ran deeper than the body, and it left pain in the soul that nothing could ever get rid of. Jiraiya had tried. I can't say that I do. It's been nearly 5 years, so my memory is a little rusty. Is there anywhere that any of you would recommend? No, unfortunately, in much the same way that you would undoubtedly be unable to offer assistance with finding a place in Konoha, I can't say that we would be able to help you. However, if you find one, simply name it and we'll pay for your stay. Of course, depending on the length of your visit, you could instead choose to room in the Raikage Manor. It's far too large a house for just Kurabi and I. Well, I don't know how long we'll be here, but I don't doubt that it'll be for some time, so that's arguably the best option. Just like that, it was decided. Hey, Mr. 9 and Miss 3, say hello to Team Kurabi. The burly Jinchuriki declared, having led Naruto, Tayuya, and the twins to Unraikyo Valley. A 5-man squad, Naruto questioned. 2 men and 2 women, with one of each being fair and dark-skinned, stood beside their apparent teacher. That's a little unusual. Won't censors pick you up really easily, especially with you being a Jinchuriki? We're all Chunin, but Samui Oni is a Junin like Kurabi-sensei. Technically, we 4 just go on missions, but when the action looks like it might get a bit hot, Kurabi-sensei comes with us. The blonde, pale-skinned Kumo nin said, pointing to his sister. That made a little more sense. Time for introductions, I guess. Tayuya said. I'm Omoi, and this is my sister Karui. Samui is our squad leader when Kurabi-sensei isn't on missions with us, and her brother is Atsui. The dark-skinned man said. Alright, I guess. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and these are my younger twin siblings, Rei and Kuga. Referring to them as anything else would cause too many problems to arise, and the pair already referred to him as their older brother, so it was really a non-issue. Kitamon no Tayuya. I'm this piss for brains girlfriend. Oh, because of his hair? Karui asked. Naruto, I don't know if I've ever said anything bad about Kumo before, but I take back whatever it might have been. Can we move here? Karui and Atsui laughed. Anyway, you're all Kurabi's students. Yes, though some of us are more studious than others. Particularly about the quieter, calmer, more controlled elements of the shinobi lifestyle. Omoi shot a glance in his sister's direction. Omoi, I swear to God, I'm gonna beat you to a pulp if you say another word. The dark-skinned ninja looked entirely unmotivated by the threats Karui made. That was probably something he'd learned from Kurabi, given the relationship between the Raikage and his brother. Hey, I just had a thought. Bonds grow stronger after ninja have fought. Why not break away and spar through the heat today? Kurabi said. That doesn't sound like a fantastic idea, these 3 all specialize in high destruction ninjutsu. As in, I saw Naruto create a mountain in Mizu no Kuni, and the twins can cut through lightning with Suidan techniques. Tayuya said. I'm more than willing to go into a kenjutsu match, though. The twins could probably use some practice, too. It gets old, fighting the same person every day. Oboro Obaa-chan is good, but she's not a master. Hell, I could probably stand to learn how to use a regular katana or tanto along with my falx. No, that'd probably be a disaster. Study one sword art and become a master. Otherwise your muscles' memories will tussle and freeze. Strangely enough, Naruto found that he was starting to get used to the older Jinchuriki's spoken couplets. He would never take after the quirk, but it was an acquired trait that Kurabi seemed to want to practice at any given time, possibly a quirk he developed to deal with his own mental traumas. It was a known, high-potential side effect of working in their trade. Jiraiya wrote smut, and the Sandaime had smoked nearly a pouch of tobacco a day. Tsunade gambled, Kakashi spoke to his dead teammates. The constant training and mission intake, as well as the risks that came with those missions, drove some ninja to insanity or criminality. If Jiraiya was to be believed, Orochimaru's experiments had started because he wanted to keep people from dying. Hitaki Sakumo had committed seppuku after being ridiculed and vilified for saving his comrades instead of completing his mission. Next to that list of choices, Kurabi's so-called rapping was fairly light in comparison. Alright then, Tayuya, though, you'll want to pick something up, maybe. Your choice, but I mean, it can't hurt, can it? It'll be easier to learn now than when we're Ero Sennin's age, the jackass. 51 years old, he's a goddamn billionaire, and he still makes me pay for shit. You're right, the redhead agreed with him. Even though genjutsu is my strong point, it'd be pretty bad of me to avoid improving other areas, particularly on such a long goddamn break from missions. You still have that old sword your Gigi used. Oboro had given him the katana her husband had used, but Naruto had his falx. The only reason he'd suggested attempting to learn how to wield it was due to his attachment to her, and the fact that it was one of the only ties to the Uzumaki clan that he had. Yeah, he unsealed it from a scroll, passing the sheathed blade to her. Yama no Okaiden, Oboro had called it. The Hall of the Mountain King, a gift given to the Shidaime Uzukage by his Aiwa counterpart, the Shidaime Tsuchikage, in honor of their alliance at the end of the Warring Clans period. Just over 40 years later, Aiwa had sacked Uzushio in a joint attack with Kumo and Kiri, as well as Danzo's surprise attack on them. Naruto fully intended to see that man dead by his own hand. Okay, Miss 3, you're comin' with me. The rest of you spar, but not too hard. Tayuya left to follow Kurabi, ready to learn. You hear that, you too? Naruto questioned Rei and Kuga. Don't go easy, but you're not allowed to try to kill. You mean, two of us are gonna be fighting kids? Omoi asked, clearly having reservations about that. Don't worry about them. Naruto grinned. Don't you know the first rule of shinobi conduct? Never, ever, underestimate your enemy. Especially not those kids. They're a little too smart and strong for their own good, that's why they're here with us, not back in the academy. Still, everybody, coat your blades with chakra so that you can't cut. Rei, Kuga, that goes for you too. The twins pouted slightly. Out of curiosity, Naruto-san, Samui began, how do you know Kurabi-sensei? How do I what? Oh, during Kiri's rebellion, I fought him and Mizukage at the same time, mostly in Kenjutsu. I thought we were a pretty even match, even though it only looked like he wasn't even using half of his swords. I got him up to 3, though. Probably would have gotten him farther if the Sanbi hadn't decided to unleash itself and up the battle. I beat it back into submission, but Kurabi got blown away by one of my attacks, and he didn't show himself again until after Yagura was dead. You were on par with Kurabi-sensei using the Santoryu style, and a cage, simultaneously. You took down a Biju. Well, I mean, it seems a lot more impressive when you put it like that. I just treated it like any other battle. Nothing was special about it from anything else during the war. No, Naruto-san, that's very cool. It takes most Kenjutsu practitioners several years to make Kurabi-sensei fight them using 3 or more swords, though only a concerted team effort would be enough to make him use all 8. Of course, at that point, he'd just release the Hachibi and be done with it, but those other accomplishments are monstrous feats. Whole armies could be slaughtered by a Biju, even a low-tail one like the Sanbi if it's in its element, which Mizu no Kuni certainly is. On top of that, you killed the Mizukage. You, someone ranked as a Chunin, killed the Mizukage. The strongest ninja in Kurigakure. Do you see where I'm going with this, Naruto-san, or do I need to continue? No, I get your point. Naruto said. I'm the same way as Kurabi, though. My Falx has two sizes, depending on whether or not it has chakra in it. This is the regular size. Naruto held out the sword for them to see. Channeling the Kyuubi's chakra into it, the blade grew large enough to the point where it seemed to necessitate double-handed wielding. All the same, Naruto held it in just his right hand. This is its unsealed size, which is better for range and power purposes. Thanks to the fact that it's attuned to my chakra, it's also light and maneuverable. So, of the four of you, who wants to take on the twins, and who wants to take a shot at me? He resealed his Falx. Omoi, Karui, you two will have a match against the children. Atsui, sit back and cool off, I'll go a few rounds against Naruto-san. Oh, this is gonna be hot. The dark-skinned twins drew their weapons, and the Uzumaki twins called theirs forth. Both parties made a show of displaying the chakra coating over the edges of their weapons. Samui drew her tanto, then she and Naruto repeated the actions of the other four.